בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל. אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל. שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל. לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. איזה ליל, האביב שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future sometime.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 984 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today we have very big news that the U.S. is threatening Kim Jong-un and North Korea with bombers once again, and that's crazy to see. And also, Iran says they're going to attack bigger than ever on Israel this time. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been getting a major amount of news once again today, showing that the United States is taking some more assertive actions, at least in East Asia at the moment, to make sure to put the North Koreans at bay and to at least lower the hostile tensions due to fear of an American reprisal coming around the corner any minute now. We have been getting a load of news today, and starting off with our little recap so that way everyone knows what we're going to be talking about tonight, we were able to hear that a joint standoff has been conducted by the Republic of Korea and U.S. Air Forces near to the area of North Korea, as B-1B Lancers have been conducting some general standoff missions against the North Koreans today, trying to force them into a diplomatic session where they will start to decrease the tensions with South Korea and possibly start to make them second guess their actions in support of the Russian Federation, at least as gung-ho as it has been so far. Simultaneously, outside of the Korean Peninsula, we have been able to hear that the Iranians are dead set on conducting an attack on Israel that will be imminent within the next short few days. We have been able to hear that they've already given this attack a name, a certain name to their operation, and we're also seeing that in the meantime, within the area of southern Lebanon, Hezbollah forces are continuing hostile action against the Israelis within the area and are attempting to try and inflict losses and drive them back. While in some instances it does appear that the Israelis have been taken off guard in a one-off scenario here and there, it does appear that the Israelis are still largely keeping control of the southern region of Lebanon, south of the Litani River, and may expand their operations further north as the conflict continues with the Islamic Republic of Iran Panics proxy forces. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that within the area of Ukraine, heavy battles have been raged today across the entirety of every active front line, from inside the Kursk Oblast, where we were once again able to see that the Russian armed forces are taking considerable losses, and all the way down into the area of Pokrovsk and Chasiv Yar, where we have seen the Ukrainians conducting very pitched defensive battles around the outskirts of Pokrovsk, and some counteroffensive actions near to the area of Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut. We've also been able to get some on and off clips of the area north of Bakhmut, showing us that some light activity has been going on by both sides in this area, but once again, a largely static front line north of the town of Seversk. We have also been able to see the continuous fighting happening within the city of Vovchansk, of course reduced to nothing but ruin, as the Ukrainians and the Russians still battle for control over the city. There is a lot of news that we have to cover today, and there's actually an insane amount of location unknowns that we were able to get just over the past 24 hours. But before we get into all of that, I do have to make the big mention that tonight is the Sunday night fundraiser, and our Sunday night fundraiser...
Sir. It's Sunday night fundraiser night, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, baby. And it is, of course, an amazing Sunday night fundraiser because Revive Soldiers of Ukraine is the nonprofit that we are fundraising for. It is an absolutely amazing nonprofit that has been helping out wounded soldiers in Ukraine, sometimes wounded almost to the point of death, to be able to rehabilitate themselves and get their lives back on track, either to return back to military service in Ukraine or to rejoin their families and continue on forward, hopefully as good as it was beforehand. They are an amazing nonprofit, and of course I have to say that any support that they can get will be massively appreciated, as it does help a Ukrainian soldier who has actually been wounded in the line of service, the very news that we're talking about today. I've already thrown in my $100 donation, and so if y'all want to try and match me, a $100 donation is what you have to do to match. If you do not want to match, however, that is perfectly fine, but any and every bit of support is, of course, greatly appreciated because it is helping out soldiers on the ground out there. And so with that...
Man, Revive Soldiers of Ukraine's a really good one, too. We've run so many fundraisers on Sundays for them. I can't even remember how many we've run. It's been quite a bit. Like a large chunk of our total, like 1.4 million in fundraising, I think has been for Revive Soldiers. And also, we started doing Nova Ukraine as well on the other nights. I think the past like 2 or 3 fundraisers have been Nova Ukraine, but Revive Soldiers is a good old faithful on the channel, and they're a very good one. So be sure to donate if you can, because it's a really good charity helping out in Ukraine.
It is an amazing one, and we hope that this fundraiser, of course, blows through the fundraiser goal and gets way higher than that. The Lee Spring Army has never missed a fundraiser goal in its entire history of nearly 3 years, and I do not believe that we're going to be missing this fundraiser goal tonight either, because the Lee Spring Army always sends its regards forever, pretty much eternally. But moving on from that and into the major news that we were able to get today, we were hearing a report from Yonhap News, which is practically a statement from the North Korean government, stating that the South Koreans and the United States are conducting a joint standoff operation currently with B-1B Lancers in the area, posing a major risk to the North Koreans, at least on a strategic level, although there is not a war going on at the moment. And this is according to Yonhap News Agency, a response to the North Korean ICBM launch that occurred just a short while ago, about 3 days ago at this point, just east of Pyongyang. To once again remind everyone of what's going on the Korean Peninsula at this moment, to pretty much tie this all together and why the United States and South Korea is conducting a joint standoff mission right now against the North Koreans, there has been a large amount of rising tensions on the Korean Peninsula for nearly a year at this point, as South Korean private citizens started to fly balloons, which have been flown over the Korean border for many years now, across the border with flash drives, USBs, and other forms of illegal content in North Korea to try and help the North Korean public get a bit of an understanding of what life is like in the outside world, and to possibly encourage them to defect or maybe start to challenge the authority of the North Korean government. The North Korean government took a great protest to this about a year ago and demanded that the South Koreans stop these citizens from conducting these actions, stating that these were not private citizens of South Korea, they were actually paid operators by the Republic of Korea. South Korea then refused to stop them, stating that they were private citizens and they were entitled to do whatever they wish, considering that this did not violate the laws of South Korea. And for this reason, the North Koreans and South Koreans, for about a year up to this point, have been conducting what we call tit for tat or back and forth actions against each other that have continuously escalated the situation until it's practically out of control at this point. From what we understand, both forces on both sides are at an extremely high level of alert. Of course, we do have to put out the caveat: the demilitarized zone is one of the few areas in the world where there generally is a state of alert that is always ongoing, but we have seen that a large amount of the South Korean forces on the DMZ, including all the way out at Yapyeongmyeon Island, way out here in the middle of the maritime demarcation line, and also all South Korean forces along the DMZ have been placed on a state of heightened alert. And we've also seen that some forces have also been mobilized and moved to the border in response to what the North Koreans have done. Meanwhile, on the other side of the border, inside of North Korea, we've been able to see that nearly 6 to 8 artillery brigades have been mobilized and moved into the area of the DMZ. These artillery brigades still at this very moment are just one order away from commencing firing operations against the South Korean side of the DMZ. From what we understand, several thousand artillery pieces are on the North Korean side of the border, and tensions, of course, remain incredibly high. We've also seen that the issue with North Korea supporting the Russian Federation in Ukraine has been brought up by the South Koreans, and that the South Koreans have vowed that they will be conducting any and every action that they deem necessary to be able to thwart or counter the North Korean efforts inside the war in Ukraine. And they are leaving pretty much all options on the table at this point, from what we're understanding. It also seems that the North Koreans, just very recently in the past few days, took the escalatory measures to the absolute limit, launching their first Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missile in a test flight. The test flight lasted for an hour and 15 minutes and splashed down in the area of the Sea of Japan, or also called the EC, very close to the Japanese maritime border. This was, of course, the most escalatory action that could be made, and there really is nothing that South Korea can do at this point to be able to counter that action, considering that the South Koreans do not have nuclear weapons of their own. This means that to be able to conduct any form of escalatory measures, at least on a diplomatic level, to try and force the North Koreans to pretty much flinch and back off, would be done by the United States. And we were able to hear that those actions were conducted today, as Yonhap News did say that South Korea and the United States and Japan have staged joint air drills with B-1B bombers in response to the North Korean ICBM launch that occurred just several days ago. There is no joke to be made about the B-1 Lancer bomber in general. The B-1 Lancer is a supersonic bomber, one of the few that's actually in service around the world, and is one of the most impressive and really flagship form of strategic bombers that we currently have in our possession here in the United States. I believe at the moment there is still a large amount of these in service. They're planned to be retired by 2036, but I think at the moment there's around 50 of these that are still operational compared to the 20 B-20s, well, not B-20s, the B-2 Spirits that we still currently have in service. But these things truly are the whopper. These things are able to carry a 75,000-pound load of ordnance, meaning, hypothetically, this thing can carry around, I believe, 20 to 24 cruise missiles inside of its bomb bays and drop them off in a decisive strike against really any country that the B-1 Lancer is brought up against. It means...
So real quick, Enforcer, I've got a question here because I'm not an aviation expert when it comes to these specific strategic bombers right here. So between the B-52 and the B-1B, is the only difference the speed they can go? Like, for example, the B-1B is supersonic and the other one is not, or is there a big difference between the two?
There's a fairly big difference in between the two. From what we understand, the B-52 Stratofortress does have a pretty decent payload yield, if we want to call it that. It is able to carry a larger amount, well, not a larger amount than the B-1, I believe, but it is still able to carry a very large payload. But the issue is how the payload's mounted and how the payload is used. Now, let me see if I can get a number on the payload of the B-51. So let's see here. Performance. Let's see here. Service ceiling, armament. It can carry 70,000 pounds of mixed ordnance, the B-52 can, meaning that the B-52, as large and ominous and powerful as this thing looks, still comes 5,000 pounds short of what the B-1 Lancer is actually able to carry.
That's pretty impressive. I was asking that question because obviously we do know right now the B-52s have been deployed to the Middle East, and now the B-1 Bone is over here near North Korea. So we have a lot of strategic bombers actually deployed right now. Is this very common for this to happen like all at once, or is this uncommon?
This is a little uncommon to happen, at least at this point, with B-52s arriving inside the Middle East and then B-1 Lancers being used in standoff missions against North Korea. This is not a normal thing. We're not really living in a normal world at this point, to be entirely honest, with how diplomatic tensions have been rising in pretty much multiple different areas at the same time. But this is supposed to be sending a very concerning message to the North Koreans, especially with the B-1 Lancers being in the area. From what I understand, and folks can correct me if I'm wrong, there are some B-1 Lancers based out of the United States Armed Forces air bases in Guam, if I'm correct. And I believe that these B-1 Lancers were most likely shipped out from Guam to this area to be able to conduct this standoff mission. Or they may have been launched from Dice Air Force Base inside of Texas and flown all the way across the Pacific to conduct this joint standoff mission. We're not entirely sure as to the origin of the B-1 Lancers. We haven't gotten an official statement from the Department of Defense saying where these B-1 Lancers came from, but nevertheless, they are going to be sending a very significant message to the North Koreans. One does have to remember that regardless of the raw payload that this aircraft can carry, the real devastating thing in a modern air war for a strategic bomber to be able to carry is its cruise missiles. In the modern day, being able to carry about 75,000 pounds of dumb bombs that you just carpet bomb someone with is largely an obsolete strategy and will never really be seen again in the days of modern warfare. These bombers are pretty much, the B-52 and the B-1 included, are pretty much entirely dedicated to the operation of launching cruise missiles in pretty much any situation that is seen in a modern era war. And the B-1 Lancer is the absolute champion of being able to carry the largest number of cruise missiles. I believe if we looked at the actual stats, I think the B-1 Lancer can carry about twice as many cruise missiles as the B-52 can due to how its internal bomb bays are organized or really constructed. I think it can carry a far larger amount than normal, and this means that this aircraft alone is able to launch 20 cruise missiles or 24 cruise missiles, depending on what type, on its own. A single B-1 Lancer can do that. 20 cruise missiles.
I'm just saying, man, real quick, I gotta say, between the B-52 and the B-1B, the B-1, I think, honestly takes the cake for the looks. Like, this thing looks really, really cool. I like the swept wing design on it, but also I saw someone else in the live chat mention the B-52 is nuclear capable. Like, we do know that. That was one big thing when the B-52s were deployed to the Middle East just yesterday. They are nuclear capable, but is the B-1B, is it nuclear capable?
All U.S. strategic bombers are nuclear capable.
Interesting. So they can all carry nukes. That should carry some weight behind it.
Yeah, that's really the big reason why this does carry weight behind it, because those cruise missiles can be nuclear armed, all 20 or 24 of them. And so just alone, this B-1 Lancer, in a sense, is almost a flying nuclear ballistic missile submarine with the amount of missiles and the amount of ordnance that it's able to carry. It's a pretty dangerous kind of an aircraft, and this is the actual intention behind it. And the reason why I'm hyping this up to all of y'all and telling y'all about how dangerous and how deadly a single B-1 Lancer can be, there are several of them from what we understand. We don't have an exact number, but we believe it's somewhere in between 2 to 4 B-1 Lancers are currently involved in this joint standoff operation at the moment. This is sending a very intimidating and a very concerning message to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea at the moment. These B-1 Lancers are most likely being flown close enough to North Korea that they actually can be seen on radar and at a high enough altitude for the North Koreans to be able to identify them. This is going to start reminding the North Koreans that there is a available U.S. strategic bomber force on its own in the area, of course excluding all of our other assets, and that could deliver a deadly and catastrophic blow to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea within a very short amount of time if the order was ever given, or if North Korea started to conduct a dangerous enough action that the United States either had to launch a preemptive attack against the North Koreans, or we had to launch a retaliatory attack for actions that had been taken by North Korea previously. This is done with the intent that this show of force will begin to make the North Koreans back off of the escalatory stance that they have made inside the Korean Peninsula and once again bring tensions down to a more manageable level than what they're at the moment, which is literally just one action away from becoming a large border skirmish inside the DMZ. So at the moment, we are waiting to see what the North Koreans will do in response to this. They have two options. They can either once again continue to try and escalate this, or they can start backing off. We're not entirely sure which one they will do. This is the first time we've ever seen the United States take any kind of definitive aggressive action on a diplomatic level against the North Koreans at this point. So this may add a lot more credence to the inevitable threat the North Koreans would be facing if they took somewhat unfortunate actions. And this may make them back off a little bit more aptly and start taking a more passive position, at least in the Korean Peninsula, although we may not be able to change their position on the war in Ukraine and their support of the Russian Federation. But still, it is...
Also, real quick, Enforcer, I am seeing people in the live chat real fast saying that the B-1 is actually not nuclear capable. Apparently, it's no longer able to carry nukes because of some reason, but I'm not really sure what the reason. Let's see. Gunfox61 said the B-1s cannot carry nuclear weapons due to treaties. So apparently, it can carry them, but it's prohibited from doing so by international law.
Interesting. Let me check that really quickly. I want to make sure that we're getting that correct because I may have actually stated that incorrectly. But from what I understood, all U.S. bombers are nuclear capable. But let me make sure that that is the case. And so let's see here: overview, avionics, upgrades, operational history, air combat command, Air Force Global Strike Command. Let's see here: variants. Okay, so we got the operators, we got the aircraft on display. Let's see here. I'm trying to read through everything really quickly. Let me go see. Is the B-1 Lancer nuclear capable? Let me just pull up that question really quickly. We'll be able to find it.
It's just kind of interesting to me that if that is the case, while the Enforcer's looking, that the B-1B can't carry nukes due to treaties, but yet the B-52 can. That's kind of an interesting reason behind it. I'll be curious to know what the motivation was.
So let's see here. So apparently, even though, that is interesting. So apparently the B-1 Lancer is a nuclear capable bomber, but apparently that ability was disabled around 1994 with the transference to, I believe it was the, the Strategic Air Command. Well, actually it was, it was the disestablishment of the SAC, the Strategic Air Command, and its reassignment to the Air Combat Command in 1992, just after the Gulf War. And then in 1994, all B-1 Lancers were no longer nuclear capable. So it is not a nuclear capable bomber at the moment. When it was put into service, it was, but it is no longer a nuclear capable bomber. So I have to correct that statement. The B-1 Lancer is not a nuclear capable bomber. When it was, though, it was capable of carrying 24 cruise missiles that were tipped with nuclear warheads, but in the modern day and age, it will not be able to conduct that kind of an air mission. It will be conducting operations with cruise missiles with conventional warheads only.
Although, regardless of if it can carry nukes or not, it's still very menacing for those to show up near North Korea because North Korea is not exactly what you call a powerhouse. So the fact that thing's showing up, a supersonic strategic bomber like that, is probably very menacing nonetheless, even though it can't carry a nuke.
It is very menacing, and I guess we have to restate everything with that because, of course, obviously nuclear bombs will not be carried on this aircraft, considering that it has not had that ability for nearly 30 years now. But as far as the aircraft's danger to North Korea, one does have to keep in mind that even if they are not nuclear weapons, which we're kind of leaning a little bit more towards them not being in the analysis, a single B-1 Lancer is still able to carry 24 guided cruise missiles, or really just cruise missiles in general, and that can cause massive amounts of damage to North Korea, especially considering that we understand they don't have any advanced or large-scale air defense network in the entirety of the country. And that means that for the large part, we would expect that out of those 24 cruise missiles fired from the single B-1 Lancer, around 20 of those cruise missiles would hit their target dead on, with another 4 probably going errant or maybe missing their target by a small margin. But nevertheless, that would still be a devastating blow to North Korea, with 20 strategic targets being hit, all by a single bomber. And of course, that multiplies with every additional B-1 Lancer that would be involved in those sorts of air missions. But we do want to make it very clear again, because this was something that I said, Matthew asked, and then we went on talking about it for a little bit, and we actually do have to make a correction to it. The B-1 Lancer in the modern day and age, where we're talking about the news right now, is not a nuclear capable bomber. I actually did say that at the beginning, and when it was originally put into service, it was, but it appears that in 1994, all B-1 Lancers lancers were disabled from operating nuclear weapons, and so for this reason, they will not be able to conduct any form of nuclear deterrence against North Korea. This would of course fall under conventional deterrence being conducted by the United States with these aircraft. The B-52, however, I believe still is nuclear capable and can carry nuclear weapons, although I'll have to go and check that one as well now, considering that the B-1 Lancer was rescinded its ability to use or operate nuclear weapons about 30 years ago. But moving on.
Now, I do know, at least according to my knowledge, the B-52 is nuclear capable, and I believe it is still allowed to carry nukes, because I saw some reports coming out today of the reason why the B-52 launches to the Middle East are so significant is because they can carry nuclear weapons. Now, I think that does not mean they're actually carrying a nuclear warhead. Obviously, they're probably not, but they have the capability to load one if needed, according to what I know.
Let's see. Interesting. So actually, this is also shocking, Matthew. Out of about the 50 or so, I think, B-52s that are still flying right now, around 30 of them are non-nuclear capable and are also only capable of conventional strikes. There's only about 20 of them left that are nuclear capable, and we don't know the specific air wing that was transported to the Middle East the other day and whether that one's nuclear capable or not. Statistically, it's more likely that these are conventional B-52s and not nuclear capable ones, just by the numbers. So those may be nuclear.
Also, Enforcer, I have a little information about that as well, because I did some snooping on Twitter today, because I looked into the B-52 deployments, because I was very curious. The ones from Minot Air Force Base, apparently the few of those that were sent over there have been confirmed nuclear capable. At least 2 or 3 of them have, according to what I saw on Twitter, according to the flight logs coming from the Air Force. So it looks like they did send the ones that were out of the 50, I think you said 50 or so that's in service, they sent a few that were nuclear capable.
Interesting. So thank you for sharing that, because I did not have that information. Usually, though, when we don't have that kind of information, I try and work off the statistical, I guess you could say, standard, which statistically the standard would be right now that any B-52 that you would see more than likely would be just a conventional B-52 and not a nuclear capable B-52. But it does sound as though the United States made a special little exception and sprinkled around a couple of nuclear capable B-52s into the Middle East just yesterday. But nevertheless, this is a fairly large action made today by the United States towards North Korea, and we are hoping, and once again, to bring y'all down the hypothetical chain here, these are the hypothetical scenarios that we may see by the North Koreans as a response to the U.S. bomber actions conducted today around the Sea of Japan and South Korea. They are either going to continue to escalate, and they're going to find a way to try and one-up the B-1 Lancers, which would be very hard to do, or they are going to try and start backing off and start conducting diplomatic concessions of a sort, or maybe just start calming diplomatic tensions with South Korea and the United States. Either one of those would be a kind of an interesting thing to see. We don't know what the U.S. reaction would be if they continue to escalate. The United States at this point is most likely gaming it out that the North Koreans will most likely back off at this point and start to conduct some sort of a diplomatic cool down. I guess that's the best way to put it, but we will never really know until about the next 2 or 3 days, and then we'll be able to clearly see what the North Koreans are doing in a reaction to the United States bombers being in the area today. But nevertheless, the U.S. has asked China to use its influence in the meantime to stop North Korean involvements in Ukraine. And this is something that is very interesting, because we are starting to see now that not only is North Korea getting off the leash with us, we're also trying to see if we can get them back on the leash against us and also the Russian Federation in Ukraine. Although, that may end up being a little bit more of a taller order. The United States doesn't really have anything to threaten North Korea with. We have put pretty much every single sanction in the book that we can put on the North Koreans pretty much back at the end of the 2000s and the beginning of the 2010s. We really don't have a lot to throw at them anymore, and so for that reason, we have practically no diplomatic leverage over them rather than threatening an all-out war. And even then, they're nuclear armed, so that threat doesn't really have that much teeth, because the chances of someone following through with a war against a highly unstable nuclear armed country is highly unlikely. So that means that the only person that actually has, well, the only nation that would actually have any kind of diplomatic sway over the North Koreans at this point would be the Chinese. The Russians are providing them food aid and a couple of other things as well, maybe possibly some improvements in rocket science, but the Chinese are the ones that largely are the lifeline for the North Koreans. And at the moment, for that reason, they're really the only ones that have any real diplomatic leverage over the North Koreans and can sponsor sponsor or condemn actions that they take around the world. The United States has approached the Chinese, and while American-Chinese relations are starting to slowly decline here over the past few years, of course due to multiple different things, including the rise of China's really imperial ambitions, if you want to call it that, although that's a little bit of a stretch, we are seeing that American-Chinese relations are in decline. Nevertheless, we are attempting to see if the Chinese will tell the North Koreans to get out of the Russian Federation, possibly in some sort of an exchange where the Chinese will fill in the gap that the Russians are filling currently in the food shortage issues that the North Koreans are having. We're not exactly sure if the Chinese can even bring the North Koreans to heel and get them back on the leash as far as the war in Ukraine is concerned, but still, it does seem that an attempt is being made. And a lot of people are wondering, will the Chinese actually try and do anything to stop the North Koreans from being involved in the Ukraine war at the moment? And so, Matthew, what are people thinking right now, and what are you thinking about this as well? Do you think the Chinese are actually going to give this an effort, or do you think that the Chinese are kind of going to just twiddle their thumbs and let the North Koreans do whatever they want to do?
All right, so after the U.S. confirmed to be asking China today to use its influence to stop North Korea from sending troops to Ukraine, and a very shocking statement here is we're basically asking our enemy to help us out. And how's that going to go? Probably not very good, but it looks like about 43% of the audience said China will never stop North Korea, while 35% said China might step in and help and actually stop them, and 12% said we need more intel on this one. And honestly, I am solidly with the 43%. China has no incentive whatsoever to stop North Korea. North Korea is sending troops to assist Russia, which is China's unrestricted ally. There are unrestricted boundaries on that alliance right now, and China's even said that themselves. So that's helping out that alliance because Russia knows that China does have influence over North Korea, and right now China's taking no efforts to stop them from sending troops, which indicates they are indeed really strong allies. So in my view here, I don't think China's ever going to stop them. In fact, they might actually encourage them in the background to continue assisting their ally, which is Russia, in fighting their war. So I see no reason that China would help out their enemy, which is the United States, by using their influence to basically stop a proxy war against the United States. So I'm definitely with the 43%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I'm a little bit undecided on this at the moment. There is a decent amount to be said that the Chinese probably do want to see the North Koreans get involved and continue to destabilize the situation in Europe. Europe, of course, being an equally important part of the Western sphere as the United States itself, almost on par in terms of economic value and even larger in population. The destabilizations that are going on in Europe because of the Ukraine war may be beneficial to the Chinese and may ensure that the Europeans' focus and efforts are tied up inside of Europe itself instead of supporting the United States in our efforts to contain the Chinese and other rival actors abroad outside of the continent. For this reason, the Chinese may want to back up and support the North Koreans in their efforts, or maybe just quietly let them do what they want to do and not really get in the way. Even if that doesn't mean they publicly support them or really support them at all, they'll just sit there and let them do what they want and turn a blind eye. However, there's also another interesting dynamic to be had that could really start to flip that on its head. The Chinese actually are trying to vie for the Europeans to pretty much split from the Western alliance, really the American sphere, and start to move into their own completely separate sphere. This is an attempt to once again weaken the Western alliance as a whole, or the Western sphere, and to try and split it into two, so that way if the Chinese ever have to deal with one or the other, it's dealing with the entire Western sphere in two different halves, instead of dealing with both halves simultaneously as one united sphere. It's generally a part of a Chinese plan to try and encourage or sponsor the creation of a separate European sphere of influence outside of the greater Western sphere. And this may start to weigh in on the Chinese that if they don't really step in and do anything to stop the North Koreans, this may start to concern the European nations enough that it actually starts to make their, I guess you could say, membership to the greater Western alliance more watertight or more of a certainty, meaning that the Chinese will have to deal with a massive monolith of an alliance and a sphere of influence well on into the future, which may be not so in their best interests. So going off of that, I would have to say that in my opinion, I believe that the Chinese may actually start putting a little bit of diplomatic pressure on the North Koreans to get them to withdraw. In the long term, it may actually be better for them. And once again, let me weigh out the advantages and disadvantages, or the short-term advantage that they could get versus the long-term advantage. If they turn a blind eye and they let the North Koreans support the Russians, the short-term advantage is a temporary destabilization in Europe, which we are still seeing ongoing at the moment, and would continue on a little bit longer with North Korean involvement. But in the long term, it actually ends up being a detriment to the Chinese, as it will most likely solidify the Western sphere of influence into a homogenous bulk like it has been for decades now, and will ensure that the Chinese in the future, up till 2049, which is their pretty much landmark date for national rejuvenation, they will still be dealing and having to combat pretty much a united Western sphere, which will be far more difficult for the Chinese to deal with than having two separate spheres. Now, the Chinese actually did start to put pressure on the North Koreans to withdraw their forces from the Ukraine war, and the North Koreans did. There is a short-term consequence for the Chinese that the European continent is more stable due to the lack of North Korean involvement than it would have been otherwise. But they get a massive long-term win, because that may actually make it look like the Chinese truly are a defender of a kind of a norm, or at least a status quo, which the United States has been doing for about the past 70 years, and that generally makes China look a lot more favorable in the Europeans' leaders' eyes than it would have otherwise. And this may mean that that would further sponsor the idea that Europe may be better off in its own separate sphere, dealing with the United States and China as they see fit, instead of being a part of a unified Western sphere, which they currently are in right now. That means that well on in the future, the Chinese could easily start to trade with the Europeans, separate from the United States, growing their economy a little bit quicker, also ensuring that they get far less resistance on any of their expansionist plans within the area of the Indian Ocean, and largely mean that the United States is having to stand on its own at that point against the Chinese on really the global scale, meaning that the Chinese would be in a much better situation long term. And knowing how the Chinese have played things out over the past 20 or 30 years, largely looking at a longer term picture or a longer term strategic outlook, they probably may actually listen to the United States and start to put more diplomatic pressure on the North Koreans to try and make them pull out of the war. At least that's what I'm thinking at the moment. So I may actually have to go with the smaller minority of people who said that the Chinese might step in and actually help out a little bit, because at least in the long term, it will help out the Chinese in pretty much dividing the Western sphere if you look at it in a long term analysis. But still,
Now, Enforcer, isn't it very interesting? Because I was sitting here just thinking back. If you remember, I can't remember how long ago it was. It was definitely months and months and months ago. Zelensky was trying to buddy up with China, or at least trying to develop some type of diplomatic relations with China, in the hopes that China would step in and try to negotiate an end to the war, or at least try to talk Russia down. And they sat there the whole time. Zelensky did, and Ukrainian, the government did, hoping that maybe China was sincere and they were actually going to step in and help out. But look at how we've come along and progressed here, all the way up to this point where, once again, China has the ability to tell North Korea, do not send any more troops to Russia, because we don't want that to happen, and you don't want to piss us off, because you really don't want to piss China off with North Korea, because they are really loose allies, and North Korea cannot afford for China to get angry with them. But now Zelensky is witnessing China had no interest whatsoever in putting a stop to the war, and now they're encouraging it. They're sending dual-use goods to Russia to keep the war going, and also they're basically giving North Korea the green light to send manpower to Russia, which also continues to keep the war going. So that just proves 100%. I'm glad Zelensky didn't have anything work out with China, because that would have been a disaster.
I agree completely with that. And it also is showing that the Chinese don't really have a lot of good ambitions with Europe, and if they do, it's only a temporary one to make it, well, really, to be honest, to try and deceive the Europeans into taking actions that wouldn't be in their benefit in the long term. That's really what it would be. And I see some people who are either agreeing with points. I see some people saying awesome point, Enforcer Matt, while I was talking for like 2 or 3 minutes. So I don't know if y'all were talking about Enforcer Matt's points before I started talking, or if y'all talking about my points. I'm not exactly sure. I've seen some people agreeing with what I've been saying. I've seen some people disagreeing with what I've been saying. The one thing I can tell y'all is that the Chinese are generally ones that try and avoid conflict, or at least any kind of an open war. And they generally view that to be bad for the overall strategic planning that they have in the long term. If y'all look into much of Chinese strategy or ever do any actual reading into what the plenums of the People's Congress come up with just about every 5 years, which are publicized, you can clearly see that the Chinese are not really a big fan of conducting armed conflict whenever it isn't necessary or needed for that matter. That's why we've seen that since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, the Chinese haven't really gotten involved in that many armed conflicts. The only large ones that they got involved in after the Chinese Civil War was the Korean War and also the the Sino-Vietnamese War of 1979. Those are the only conflicts they got involved in, and even still, those were largely for reasons of national security interest or border interests. They generally avoid conflict whenever it's possible. They generally like to operate more so through a legal framework or a diplomatic and economic framework to be able to manipulate the situation to get control. And so that means that the Chinese don't really employ overt aggressive actions. They usually conduct some sort of a passive, more so economic, diplomatic, or even a legal form of a stratagem that is supposed to, in time, either encourage someone to make an action that will not be in their best interest or to actually lock a country to the Chinese indefinitely, which is something that they've been doing a lot currently within the Indian Ocean area. But still, nevertheless, just to put that out there, you have to remember that the Chinese operate on a very different game than really the rest of the world works with, at least with the rest of our allies. The North Koreans are very openly aggressive and very overt in their actions. So is the Russian Federation, and really so is the Islamic Republic of Iran. But the Chinese are truly a different kind of a beast to deal with, and it's very important to put that into considerations because everything the Chinese do is not going to be very clear and out in the open. You really have to try and game out what they would be benefiting from this in the long term if they were to take an action. And one more thing I do have to remind everyone of is that if they do listen to the United States and they do put pressure on the North Koreans, there is a little something down here that they may be possibly able to wiggle through the future. Now, the United States and China are currently not doing well diplomatically. Everyone knows that, and that isn't behind closed doors sort of a secret. Everyone knows that deterioration is happening in between the two. But nevertheless, this could be a moment, actually, for the Chinese to try and rekindle just a little bit of American diplomatic goodwill to be able to get a little bit of a benefit out of it. If they listen to America, and they actually do tell the North Koreans to back off, that is going to get them a little bit of favor with the United States. And that favor could be used to try and eventually see if the United States would pressure the Taiwanese government into agreeing to the the one state, two systems form of an agreement that the Chinese keep on pressing onto the Taiwanese over and over and over. The United States has already relented in the past when China gained diplomatic favor with us back in the 70s and rescinded our recognition of national sovereignty from China and instead placed it from Taiwan and then placed it onto the communist Chinese. They have already been able to do this before, and it's entirely possible that if they show another temporary sign of goodwill by conducting this action with the North Koreans, they may be able to get the United States wriggled into a position where the United States would start to pressure the Taiwanese into saying, look, the one country, two systems idea isn't that bad, just sign it, I'm sure it'll be fine. That could happen because we already have rescinded our recognition of national sovereignty and pretty much say that they are not a country, but they have a separate government from the Chinese, and the Chinese need to work out pretty much on the American level with a rebellious province what they're going to do. And so that means that if the Chinese try and work some actions in a certain way, like with the North Koreans, they may be able to get just that little bit of extra diplomatic favor with the United States, or we start to pay less attention to what they're doing with the Taiwanese.
Hopefully the U.S. isn't that, flexible with their foreign policy like that. Hopefully we wouldn't walk away from an ally simply because we gave them some diplomatic leverage. That would seem very, very weak on the part of the United States.
It's unlikely, I'll be honest. It's fairly unlikely that that would happen, but it's still a consideration that the Chinese might try and game out and see if that would happen, because even still, if it didn't happen, which, and of course I got to put this out there, it is unlikely that such a thing would happen where the United States just pretty much starts to abandon Taiwanese independence in a grander scheme, but the Chinese would still consider that a possibility, even if it's an unlikely one, because think about it in the Chinese mind. If they did get a little bit of diplomatic with a favor with the United States, that is a massive win. If they don't, they'll still end up invading Taiwan eventually at some point, and so nothing of value is truly lost. They kind of collectively get a win, maybe, if they start to pressure the North Koreans to withdraw from the Ukraine war.
Maybe so. I just hope the U.S. would not step away from allies like that because we've set a very bad precedent of really not standing by our allies over the last few years, and actually before that even as well. I'm not going to try to pin it on one person or another. We don't get into politics, but we need to start setting the standard here that when the United States says we're going to back someone up like Taiwan, Israel, Ukraine, or whoever it is, we need to stand by them till the very end and never simply give someone else diplomatic leverage just because it's convenient and maybe serves our interest. We should always honor our word with our allies, because if our allies can't trust us, then we're in deep trouble. Because if we're ever in a bad situation where we need to fall back on our allies in whatever situation that might be, they're probably not going to be there for us if they know that our word means nothing. So hopefully we wouldn't just step away from Taiwan if it got inconvenient.
Hopefully we wouldn't. That would be a pretty stupid thing, in my opinion, to do, because Taiwan is still a major economic powerhouse in this region and is also a major strategic contributor to computer technology in the entirety of the Western sphere and really around the entirety of the world. Another thing I do want to put out there, some people are saying, well, isn't that weird, like the one state, two systems sort of an idea? It actually isn't, because that's usually what the Chinese have implemented in the past 30 to 40 years when trying to integrate a new pretty much a new kind of a territory or a country into their nation. That's what they did with Hong Kong, actually. Although technically Hong Kong was going to be given over to the Chinese in 1991 because the British only had, I believe, a 99-year lease on the area of Hong Kong, which was a crown colony. When they were getting it back, they still wanted to make the deal sound sweeter, at least at the time, by saying, look, we're not going to stamp out like the Hong Kong government. It will be one country, so Hong Kong will be a part of China, but it'll be a two systems arrangement to where we will respect the legalities of Hong Kong and also their government. And so, that will be the way it is. And then they said, that will only last for 50 years. And then after 50 years, we'll start the process of assimilation, meaning that they'll start to pretty much turn Hong Kong into a full-on part of China that doesn't really look any more different than anywhere else. And so at the time, a lot of people weren't really happy with Hong Kong changing from being a crown colony to being a part of communist China, but still there wasn't really any option, and the British didn't have the ability to really defend Hong Kong in some sort of a larger war, and so for that reason it was handed over. But as many people have seen with how things went in Hong Kong, especially in 2019, the one state, two systems philosophy was trampled on immediately once there was any kind of a pushback. So that once again started to lead to a lot of hesitancy for the Taiwanese on the one state, two systems kind of an idea, because they saw how it turned out for Hong Kong and it didn't turn out that well. But still, the Chinese are still trying to push it. And they're actually, if you ever listen to what Chinese government officials say to Taiwan, they say, oh, these stupid nationalists in charge of Taiwan that want to be a separate country, they're these sick and evil people. They're the people we have the problem with. But not all of you guys that actually consider yourselves to be Chinese on the island. We're just like y'all. And look, like what happened with Hong Kong? Look, that was some, goofy British honky-tonky stuff. We just got a little angry there and went off on them. We would never do anything like that to y'all because y'all pretty much are just Chinese. There's no difference in between like y'all and a lot of y'all's laws and what we have on the mainland. Hong Kong doesn't even apply. It was a crown colony with a whole bunch of crazy British laws, like, respecting free speech and stuff. That's crazy, right? Like, y'all can kind of relate to us a little bit more. That's literally almost like the rhetoric that the Chinese give to Taiwanese nationalists on why they should rejoin with the mainland and become a part of communist China. It's a really weird kind of a thing. And so I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, with how that goes with China and such things. But with that, it is time for us to move on out of this area because we have loads and loads of news to cover, and really getting into this whole thing requires hours to talk about. And obviously there's a load to unpack here in the middle, in East Asia, and there's also a load to unpack inside the Middle East right now. And so moving on out of the East Asian area and into the Middle East, we are able to see that, of course, the attack from the Islamic Republic of Iran is going to be coming around fairly soon, and we are starting to hear that the Iranians are even starting to publicize that this one actually has a name to the operation. They're calling it Operation True Promise 3, The Return of the True Promise. A very interesting kind of a movie title, but according to what we have, General Shahram Irani, like his last name, they're really leaning into the whole Islamic Republic of Iran deal, but the commander of Iran's Navy also stated that Iran will not have mercy on Israel this time, as compared to the other times where they launched hundreds of missiles intent on destroying the Israelis and none of them really did any damage. This time it really will have an impact, but nevertheless, we are starting to see that the Iranian rhetoric is a lot more I guess you could say violent. Well, it's always violent, but of course, this one's really leaning into there's no hesitancy at all. We are going to be launching the strike very soon. Of course, I have to put it out there that Iranian statements sometimes look like that, and then the attack will come like 3 weeks later. So we don't know if the attack is happening within the next few days or whether it's going to be happening right now, but still, we are going to be waiting to see how big this Iranian attack is. We are assuming it will at least be as large as the last one, possibly including several hundred ballistic missiles and no drones, but we will be waiting and seeing. But before I move on from that, I have seen that our fundraiser is sitting around $1.6 thousand, about halfway to the fundraiser goal, and we have to get that thing on up there to the fundraiser goal itself. And so we are going to be calling up an ancient order, the general order.
Order! I have a general order.
And if you are a member of the LSA and you consider yourself to be one, and you have $5 at a minimum to throw in this fundraiser, throw it in right now. We have a general order in effect, and every member of the LSA must mobilize to accomplish the honorable and just goal of reaching the $3,000 goal on this fundraiser for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. I'm leading the charge by throwing in a 20, but hopefully we can see that the whole of the Lee Spring Army comes together to slam out that $3,000 goal, and once again to see the Lee Spring Army to victory on another Sunday night fundraiser. And so hopefully we will see that that happens right now. But before we get on into the rest of the Middle Eastern news, we actually did get some combat footage from southern Lebanon today, from actually the Hezbollah side. We do have a very interesting question, and it seems as though this one's been actually a little bit controversial at the moment, and it seems as though some people have some different ideas. Analysts are saying that Putin is unlikely to negotiate an end to the war since the Kursk invasion began. He was going to negotiate it, but once Ukraine invaded Kursk, it just went out the window. That's what the analysts are saying. And also, a lot of people have been throwing in their thoughts on this and saying whether they believe that Putin won't negotiate now because of the Kursk invasion, or whether he was ever going to negotiate at all in the first place. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so actually, somewhat of a contentious poll. It's actually evenly split here amongst two different results. 41% of the audience said that's true, Putin will not negotiate after the Kursk invasion, while 39% said Putin was never going to negotiate, and 13% said that's false because Putin will still talk. And I will say that Putin said he was going to negotiate before the Kursk invasion happened, and now Putin is saying that he will not negotiate. That's what he's currently saying right now, and he's acting like there's a real change there. But in reality, though, even though Putin said he was going to negotiate before, he was not actually coming to the negotiation table to actually make a real good faith negotiation. He was simply showing up to make it look like Russia had an interest in peace. Because if Russia had an interest in peace, they would pull back all their troops to the Russian border, and they would leave Ukraine because they had no business there and they had no right to invade. So that fact alone right there tells you that Putin is not operating in good faith, and even though he might have said in theory that he would have negotiated, it was never really serious. So I'm actually with the 39%. He was never going to talk, and that was simply the bottom line. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I don't believe Putin was ever going to negotiate. I would actually have to go with the 39%. I don't think the Kursk invasion is any reason for him to call all the bets off and say that he's not going to start talking about a peace negotiation, because we've never seen that any of them have actually been sincere. Every single time that he said, this time we actually will consider a good peace, he's never really meant that. It's always just been a load of BS. Because then when the Ukrainians go, okay, well, what's the offer? He'll go, Ukraine is destroyed, I run the country, screw you, give me money. And then the Ukrainians are like, no. And he's like, look, see the warmongers, they don't really want to end the war. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're giving unreasonable peace terms. You know, if you really want a peace, you would give out reasonable peace terms. And they're not. And so, with that in mind, I would generally have to say I don't think he was ever going to negotiate a peace. I think the Kursk invasion doesn't even have an impact on that. I just think that Putin is hell-bent on keeping this war going regardless of what happens until total victory is achieved. And I don't even think total victory will really ever be achieved in the current conditions we're seeing right now inside of Ukraine. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And moving on from that, And on into our next little clip from inside of southern Lebanon, we were able to see that Hezbollah forces did launch an ATGM at a group of IDF soldiers today that were in the area. It was dated as the 30th of October of 2024, meaning that this happened very recently, and the footage was just published. And we can see the Israeli soldiers right there. Hezbollah, of course, has their little 7-Up logo in the bottom left corner, letting us know that this is them. And also, by the way, a huge thanks to everyone who's pouring in donations to the fundraiser. I once again want to let folks know, because I am seeing, really quickly, just to pause this and make a mention of this, I am seeing that some people are saying that it's getting a little tougher economically, and some folks are getting stretched, and I don't want anyone to worry about that. Like, if you do consider yourself a member of the LSA and you cannot support the fundraiser, that is entirely fine. Like, it is truly entirely fine, because we want y'all to take care of yourselves first, and while a lot of people do want to help out Ukraine, I do have to put this out there kind of as a statement to really alleviate a lot of people's conscience. This channel was the first one in the sphere to fundraise for Ukraine. We were some of the first people covering the war, and we ran a fundraiser for the first time, I think, 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks into the war, way back then, and it raised $30,000 at the onset. Over 3 years, this channel has raised about $1.4 to $1.5 million for Ukraine, and no one could ask any more from all of y'all than we have been able to so far. And I would never ask y'all to go out of your way to put yourself in a bad position to help out Ukraine, because y'all have helped out about as much as y'all possibly can for a time that really honestly has been longer than we ever anticipated. And so if you cannot, I perfectly understand, because this war has been going on for quite some time, and I could not expect y'all to continuously blow fundraisers out of the water for 3 straight years, because I didn't even think that we would be able to do it for 1 year, much less 3. And so I do want to make sure to put that out there to all of y'all, because if it is not possible, it is entirely fine. If anything, if we do not reach the fundraiser goal, this will be, I think, the first time that it's never been reached. If that's the case, we will lower the fundraiser goal to something even lower and more manageable for the entirety of the LSA, because y'all have done enough already. Like, that's really the way I've been looking at it for about the past 8 months, and that's why we've never been trying to really push the fundraiser goal to insane heights, like back up to 5,000 or 10,000, is because we do know that all of y'all have done everything y'all can for 3 years, and that's why we never want to put a lot of pressure on everyone, because y'all have done heroes work as it is as the entirety of the LSA so far as I'm seeing it. But with that, I hope
that is true. And also, real quick, Enforcer, first of all, I want to thank everybody for donating tonight, because that is very generous of you all to donate to a very good fundraiser and a good charity that helps out Ukraine. But real quick, I have to make a note. I hate to bring this up on a night where we're having a good time with the fundraiser, but sadly, YouTube apparently is having a glitch once again. I've been contacted by Andy L, as well as Tom Exman, as well as a handful of other people as well, saying that they donated tonight, but it was not showing up in the live chat, but it shows it was deducted from their credit card. So apparently YouTube is having that same glitch. We have seen this before, and usually what happens, this is just usually what we've seen, they will deduct it from the card, but they will eventually take the charge off your card once they realize the donation did not properly process, and they usually take it off. But I have to leave that up to y'all what you're going to do with the charge, because if it didn't show up in the live chat, I think that means it actually was not processed from what I know, and apparently they're having that glitch again. So once again, if that's happened to you, sorry about that. Sadly, we can't control it. That's on YouTube's end, but hopefully it's pretty limited. It looks like maybe just about 5 or 6 people so far have had that issue, and the rest have come through.
And it does look like there are some massive donations coming through, like Rad Doctor with 100 and LSA Rocks with a 200. We're actually, crazily enough, up to $2,700 at this point, so we're only $300 short. And if we can just hit $3,000, I'll be blown away. And if the fundraiser stops right here at 2.7, I'll be blown away. I'm blown away that we were able to just even run fundraisers nearly 3 years in. So y'all just know that. I really do want y'all to know that. We've been talking lately about... Dang, Rita Fuchs throwing a 300.
Whoa.
We just hit 3. Oh, wait a minute. We're $5 short, actually.
Oh, $5 away, man. We're $5 away, man. That's a close call.
Hey,
Oh,
Denny Tree, we were at 3,000 even. We just hit the goal, baby.
Jaga, Igor, man. That's what I'm telling you. Oh, look
Skyman.
at 200. Dang, man. Look at that. We're up to 3,220 now, man. That's crazy.
Dang. Oh my lord, we just hit the goal and we actually got past it a good bit. We're up to $3,220. That is unbelievable. And I gotta give y'all a huge thanks for hitting that goal. I honestly did not think that we would hit that tonight. But regardless, y'all are amazing. And what I was trying to say a second ago, even as we were seeing that it didn't look like the fundraiser was, doing well tonight, is that y'all have done heroes work for 3 years. I never want anyone to feel bad for the fundraiser slowing down or maybe not even reaching a goal. Whenever it happens, it will be the first time that has ever happened on the channel, and we are trying to figure out what we're going to be doing with that, because either we can bump the fundraisers down to being a lower number, well, like a lower goal, maybe like 1.5 or $2,000, or we can start to sundown the fundraisers, considering that the channel has raised 1.5 million, and make the fundraisers more of a rare occurrence, more like at once a month or maybe once every other week, so that way people have more time to recover and recoup from the last fundraiser. We're not really sure what we'll be doing with that. Really, that decision will come around the first time that we don't reach a fundraiser goal, which I don't know when that will happen, because right now it honestly looks like that might not ever happen, and we'll continue to hit fundraiser goals wildly well, because we're now up to $4,000, so we're now $1,000 above the goal. But we will be trying to figure that out, because we don't want anyone to feel like they're under a great deal of pressure, and this is something that we've been talking about for a while as the fundraisers have gotten smaller and smaller. Is the LSA getting under too much pressure at this point, because they've been supporting Ukraine for 3 straight years? But still, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we're going to get back to this clip that Hezbollah published today, showing them attacking Israeli soldiers near to a compound inside of southern Lebanon. Now, we can see right here that they have noted the Israeli soldiers and their location, and we don't know what that is up on the roof. It's an Israeli flag, interestingly enough, a massive one at that. I mean, that thing's
a long-lasting flag, a massive flag. It's a flag that, if you would give it the chance, it would fly through the air gracefully.
Man, I've got to tell you, I have never seen a flag that big in my life. That thing is literally like 30 feet tall. I've never seen anything like that.
It's the best.
Man, I'm telling you.
Rawr.
What the hell? Like, are you good?
I don't know, man. I don't know, when the growling was happening that we're doing on Zelensky real quick, I was thinking it sounds like really growly, kind of like gravelly or something like that. I was just like, rawr.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, that was weirdly placed. I was like, what is that? But still, look at them go. And we can see Hezbollah is just watching the Israelis. Kind of weird. They're giving these stalker kind of vibes right now, and now they're about to fire their ATGM.
Oh, just ATGM in the field here. Unfortunate for these fellows.
And there goes the missile towards the Israeli soldiers. And let's see, where's the point of impact?
I think that's going to be a miss, boss.
Right on the side of the building. We don't know if there's any wounded or killed. Of course, that information didn't come out. But it now looks like Hezbollah is actually going to give the quick replay like the NFL on a good play, which is a little interesting. And we see them showing a large group of Israelis moving into the building. But once again,
yeah, they 100% missed, man. No way they hit any of them.
Well, you know something that's interesting? It looks like it hit this balcony up here on the second floor and like grazed the building. I don't really know if it was a really solid hit. There is an Israeli right down there. Well, actually, it looks like, I don't know where that hit. Like, it either hit on the balcony or on the ground to the right. Can't really tell. But I'm not going to lie. There's a fire outside of the building, and it looks like the balcony's gone. So I think that they actually grazed the building, or the damage was moderate, at least. We can see the Israelis now deploying a smoke screen.
That was actually a pretty effective smokescreen, actually. Like, sometimes you see them deploy those, and they're like, that was kind of effective. But that one actually worked just fine.
Yeah, man, I was like, dang, that's pretty crazy. That one actually stood in place too. But still, nevertheless, we are seeing that the Israelis are taking some hits within the area of southern Lebanon by some sneak attacks from the Hezbollah forces. But nevertheless, we are hearing that their ground operations are going fairly well at the moment, and we are expecting that they will continue to go fairly well on into the future. But moving on from that and out of the area, we are now going to be moving up into Ukraine, where we have most of the bulk of the actual footage from the ground that we were able to get today. But before we move into that, though, I do want to make sure that we talk about the Middle East just a little bit more, because Iran says it will use all of its military might, including its ancient arsenal, against Israel in the upcoming attack. And a lot of people are wondering, are the Iranians bluffing? And it seems as though most people are thinking that they are, and some are thinking that it will be a big one this time like it was the last two times. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we've asked this question for maybe a couple of days now about whether or not Iran is bluffing, and now Iran's doubled down and said they will use all of their military might, everything they've got left, in their upcoming attack against Israel. So, do you think they're bluffing? And about 50% of the audience said yes, Iran is bluffing on the severity of the attack, while 33% said no, Iran will launch a very serious attack, and 10% said we need more intel first. And on this one, I would say that I really honestly think that Iran is not bluffing. But the key here is they said they'll use all of their military might in their arsenal. And right now, their arsenal is pretty bare right now. They do have ballistic missiles left. Obviously, they have some left. And they also have some other weaponry as well. But once again, they've launched several attacks on Israel and depleted a good portion of their stockpile. So while they will be able to still do damage against Israel in some form or another, it's not going to be as bad as it could have been if they'd had their entire stockpiles that they depleted over the last couple of months. So unless they've suddenly gotten a brand new, like, fresh shipment from Russia, then I think they're bluffing on the severity, and it'll probably be the same level of severity we saw last time, which Israel had no problem taking out whatsoever. So I'm with the 50%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm with the 50% as well. I think they're kind of bluffing on the severity because if it can't really be larger than the last one. From what we know, the last one was about as large as they can feasibly get. So there's no way that this one can be even bigger and grander than the last one. It's either going to be comparable or a little bit smaller. So I would generally have to say they're probably bluffing. And on top of that, once again, I'm not even going to go through the breakdown of Iranian equipment. We've done that a million times on this channel, and it's all from the 1960s and 70s. And there's no way that you can really field all of that in large numbers without most of that breaking down afterwards and having no way to repair it, because there are no spare parts for a lot of those vehicles anymore. So with that in mind, I would have to say I'm going to be with the 50% as well. But moving on from that and out of that area, it's now time for us to move on into Ukraine. And we got to see that today the Ukrainians were able to successfully intercept a Shahed 136. Look at that thing. Flying right over Kyiv.
The sound of a covered dead.
Oh, and a dead-on hit.
Oh! The sound of a carburetor on a computer dead getting blown away.
Now it's falling like a leaf.
Man, listen to that thing revving up.
Dude, that thing went... It's like, dude, give up. It's like you're going down, man.
He's going down, Billy. He's going down.
Captain, coming down quickly. I don't think we can last much longer. Damn it, Scotty, pull it together. And he's trying to pull it up and rev the engine at the same time. It's like, dude, just give up on that drone, man. It's like it's in a flat spin. There's no way to recover that at this point. Well, there is a way. I know someone's about to say, I'm a novice pilot, and I have a pilot's license, and you can recover from a flat spin. And I know, but at least with this drone probably having most of its wings shot off right there, I'm doubting it can. Airfoil is probably messed up. But moving on from that. And here's some more ground fire. Oh, a missile just missed the thing by inches. Dude, I was about to say, man, you put over 2K raised now. I was like, yes. I was like, that is technically true, dude. That's like one of those statements where like, dude, this is a video. And it's like, yes. It's like I was like that. I was like,
you see that 2 and the 4 is so close together on the keyboard. It's hard not to press the 2 sometimes. But no, it is over 4,000 raised now, not 2K.
Man, and that's crazy considering that so many people have run into donation issues tonight to the fundraiser. That is crazy to think we hit 4K. That's absolutely insane to me, actually. And here comes another one of the lawnmowers. This one's certainly in Kyiv.
One.
Yeah, and this one's certainly in Kyiv because they got a giant Kyiv watermark on the video. Oh, what's this? Oh, flak. And we can now see a Ukrainian helicopter chasing down another Shahed. This would be the second time that a Ukrainian helicopter has chased down and shot down a Russian Shahed. And we can see it just chasing it down right there, almost like a high-speed chase in the skies above the fields. Which is
I wonder if one of those Shaheds have ever turned around and, like, started coming after the helicopter.
Man, I don't know. Like, I don't think they can see the helicopters. I think their cameras just face forwards. But who knows? Maybe that would be
that
weird.
would be an interesting sight. What if that thing just whipped around and started like gunning it, like straight for the helicopter? They'd be like, "Oh, yeah!" It's like, turn around, run! It's like running from a lawnmower in the sky.
Dude, it would be like that meme of Dave Chappelle knocking over that pitcher of water and then yelling, "Get out of here!" and like everyone's running from the table, dude. That would be what the helicopter pilots were like at that point. But here's the next clip. We can hear it out there somewhere. That was a bird, by the way, down there. That was not the drone. There's the drone. Dude, those things are so freaking loud. It's like using like a model airplane motor, and somehow the entire city can hear this thing before it even makes it there. It's like, these things are insanely loud.
You would think that there's some type of muffler or like some type of silencer on the thing, because it's like, isn't like a huge like part of the attack like actually having like a little bit of like, you know, covertness or something to it? This thing comes in so loud that every single AA gunner in the area is going to be firing at this thing coming in, because the thing is like louder than a motorcycle at full revs.
Dude, you're just sitting there one day, man. It's like, man, air defense is kind of boring. You just hear. Should we get on the positions? Nah, that thing's still in Russia right now. It'll be here in like an hour. It's like, dude, that thing is.
Who needs radar when you have the sound?
Dude, you know what they need to do, man? They need those goofy concrete things that they had in Britain. The concrete radar things. They're not concrete radar things. Let me see here. Let's see. British concrete echolocation things. Let me see if I can get one of these. Oh, yeah, here we go. Dude, this is what the Ukrainians need, man, for real. They need these giant concave concrete things. Just have someone stand in front of it. You can find those things easily that way, man. You'd be like, yep, 7 miles out, just to the right, open fire. It's like, dude, that would be way easier, man, than using a radar.
Just walk outside with like, you know, the like the little horn that like the old like folks used back in the day, like hear better when they couldn't hear. They're like, what you saying? And they're like holding that horn up to their ear. It's like, man, the AA gunner just looks up and goes, oh, and pulls out the horn like, I hear a Shahed, and then they start firing at the thing. No radar needed.
Man, better yet, man, I got something even better, man. To really get them while they're taking off inside of Russia, go get an Alp horn, like one of these, and just use that to listen for it. You know, just put the mouthpiece up to your ear and hold that thing up and listen for it.
Yeah, that's a good idea, man. I think they could probably hear it. Probably actually without the horn, but the horn would help.
Man, the horn would help. Honestly, a great deal. Because it's not about hearing it when it's getting close. It's about hearing it when it's literally taking off. It is so loud, you can probably hear it when it's launching in Russia.
Also, real quick, Enforcer, I don't mean to interrupt the video one more time. I have to make one more interruption here. But Butchie the Crouton just showed up, and I wanted to give Butchie a shout out real quick because they're sharing their journey of delivering a truck to Ukraine on Twitter. I've been watching it the whole time they've been doing that. So huge shout out to Butchie, by the way, for going a step further, just like many others in the LSA have as well, like BC Skyman delivering the bandages along with Yuri. Now Butchie is also helping to deliver a truck as well. So once again, huge shout out to Butchie the Crouton. I just want to give the credit there. And also, hello to Butchie and the live chat. They said hi there, hello. And also, huge shout out to you and thank you as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to say a huge shout out to Butchie the Crouton as well. I've also been watching the journey of that car, and I see that I think it made it to Lviv today. And I gotta say, that's incredibly cool. It's also neat to see the sticker of the flag of the LSA on the back of the car, and I hope that it's put to good use in Ukraine. And so, thank you so much for sharing that journey with everyone, and thank you for also doing that in the name of the LSA. A lot like BC Skyman and Yuri's operation into Ukraine to provide all of those Leukomed absorbing bandages, which I think we provided in thousands, along with a flag of the LSA. I also have to thank you for providing an entire car in the name of the LSA as well. And so
also, Enforcer, can we show a picture of that real quick? Because I'm going to pull it up on Twitter and see if I can repost it. I'm going to repost it on our main page, by the way. Let me go to Butchie's page and get those posts real quick. I want to show this on the air real quick, if you don't mind, Enforcer, if we have just a quick second.
Sure thing. And while you do that, I actually saw someone say something a little bit goofy. I want to make sure to address it really quickly. We were talking about how fundraiser goals are a little bit harder to reach this day. Someone said you could put your money in and not lower it, and then said, how much do you guys donate? Okay, first, I put in $100 every single weekend. If you're around at all, you would see that at the beginning of the stream. Second off, I'm not made of money, and I'm going to be completely frank, I'm not going to go broke for Ukraine. Like, I'm 100% for Ukraine, but I'm not going to be living under a bridge for a Ukrainian nonprofit. Sorry about that. That's just the honest reality, because I don't expect any viewers to do that to themselves to support Ukraine, and I'm not going to expect that out of myself either. We got a life to live, I've got to eat, and I'm not going to be going broke and starving to death so that way I can say I put all my money into a nonprofit. Like, just to be entirely honest. So, with that, hopefully, we've got it reposted on Twitter.
It is reposted.
And we do. And let's go take a look at it really quickly, and let's see here. Hang on, I got to get to it. There we go. Hey, there it is right there. And it is an absolutely amazing thing. Look at that.
Look at that. Also, by the way, I see the LSA sticker on the back right there above the Volunteers for Ukraine truck, like logo thing. It's right there on the back window. I see the LSA flag sticker. That is very cool.
And it is incredibly cool. Look at that. We've got the Ukrainian flag on the back, volunteers, carforukraine.com. We also have the flag of the LSA on the back of the car. And it is absolutely amazing to see that Butchie the Crouton is providing this to the Ukrainian armed forces. Hopefully they'll be able to get a large amount of use out of this thing. They're always in need of automobiles, especially really any kind of automobile that can carry people or a limited amount of cargo. So it is absolutely incredible and amazing to see that Butchie the Crouton from the UK is providing his car personally to the Ukrainian armed forces. And so a big shout out to you once again. That's a massive undertaking right there. And we, in the entirety of the LSA, owes you a massive amount of appreciation and applause for providing this thing to the Ukrainians, especially in the name of the Lee Spring Army. Not only did we have the first operation into Ukraine in the name of the LSA, thanks to the expedition by BC Skyman and Yuri, we're now having the second expedition in the name of the LSA into Ukraine. And this one is actually an entire car. So that's actually pretty crazy to see. And of course, a big shout out to Butchie the Crouton, everyone. Give him a huge thanks and a massive shout out, because he was the one who personally undertook this, but did it in the name of the LSA in honor of all of y'all. And so this deserves a massive amount of praise and thanks. And of course, absolutely incredible stuff to see. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, Butchie the Crouton said that, just to put this here, Miss Disa said, love you for what you're doing and the great pictures. And I also agree with that, Miss Disa. I think you're here tonight, and I would certainly agree with that statement. And Butchie the Crouton actually added in a little bit about the adventure. I'll be the first to admit it, it's not been easy and extremely stressful at times. But I know why I'm doing it, and that makes it slightly easier. I don't do things to show off, and I don't do touristy stuff. Shot to the hot dog man right there. Back streets and old Ladas is where I'm happy. And I gotta say, an amazing effort right there, Butchie the Crouton. You may not be doing it for any kind of credit or any kind of thanks, but I think that you deserve a massive amount of credit and thanks for this, especially since you, by slapping the flag of the LSA onto this thing, wanted to make sure to let the folks in Ukraine know who's behind him and who's backing him up, and that is the entirety of the LSA. And I got to give you a huge tip of the hat to you, and a massive congratulations for you doing that. That is something that no one would ever ask, and you've gone well above and beyond in support of American and Western interests compared to the common person. And so a massive shout out to you once again, and I hope we've been able to address that incredibly well. And so with that, We are now going to be moving on into the rest of the clips that we got of the air raid over Kyiv. And we have a load of footage to get to from here. So we might not want to dilly-dally on each one. We might want to start knocking them out. So here's the clip.
Да.
Oh no.
And we see the next drone coming in, scaring the birds away. It's so loud.
Sounds like a Honda Civic at 2 a.m. in the morning when you're trying to sleep.
Man, I'm telling you, man, it really does. Like your average ricer every morning.
Вот так вот летит шахет.
That must be the straight pipe Honda Civic.
Не дай бог шахнул.
That defect's kicking in.
В нашу сторону летит. Вот так вот. Сейчас будет бах.
Не, мимо нашого дома пішов. Боже мой.
Вот так вот.
Я ж кажу, зі сторони Житомира. Вони сказали. Сотні.
And we see them looking around the skies for more drones flying over at some point.
Нами летить.
Пидор, блядь.
We hear this one still zooming around up there.
Man, it's like out there just said, "Daddy." I was like, what did they say?
Man, some people might call that drone danger. She calls it daddy. It's like, dang, all right.
Man, I call the drone dead.
Man, honestly, though, they are dead with how damn loud they are. Someone's out there giving out an ancient cry that went, yeah. I was like, what the hell is this, Dune
That's
2?
Hot dog man on a Monday morning when he realized he has to work. Oh man.
Dude, honestly though, man, I thought that person out there was beginning the movie Dune 2. You know the one I'm talking about, Matthew, where the guy like rides the worm or whatever, and they're like, yummy, yummy. You know, and then he rides the worm. It's like, I thought they were doing that out there. Show's about to take over the drone and ride it. The worms! The worms! Here it comes again. And that's the end of the clip right there, but absolutely wonderful to see. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on from that and into our next little clip in our actually in the Kursk region before we get to the location unknowns. I do have to keep this in mind, everyone. We are going to have to start speeding this up a little bit because we are an hour and a half into the news segment and we still have not gotten to a question segment at all, and we still have a load of news to cover, like pretty much all of the news videos. So I'm going to have to start speeding through it a little bit to make sure that we cover all of it. But moving on from that, we were able to see the 8th Special Forces Regiment hitting some Russian forces within the area today. We can see that right here. And we see them slamming the Russians. I mean, dang. And we can see this one coming down and taking out this abandoned, I don't know what the hell that was, maybe a Lada, but I don't really know for sure. And we can see the next drone flying around in the fog. Oh, and we got a little guy on a dirt bike, and we got this Buhanka here. This Buhanka pickup, actually. These things are cursed. And you can see a Russian in the back of it. He's trying to take down that drone. It's not going to work for him. Oh, and he took a little dive, and I think he took a little die. But we can see the Bahanka pickup gone once and for all. And now they're going to finish it off with a couple of extra FPV drones. That one blew off the cab, and looks like that one's just circling around and double checking. This one's now taking off from the side of the street, chasing down this guy on a bike. You've heard of Elf on the Shelf. Now get ready for let's see. I'm trying to figure out one. It was gonna be like dork on an orc, but sadly that doesn't work, or orc on a dork. That doesn't really work either.
Orc with a stork.
Orc with orc with a fork. Nork with a fork, dude. That's an unholy combination they've never even eaten before. But we can see that guy getting hit down there as well. We now see them hitting even another destroyed Russian vehicle on the road. And we see them hitting a Lada. Now, that is a Lada Niva right there. And that one hit right on the side window.
A whole lot of nada.
I like it, man. I like it.
Classic, man. Classic.
Real trap walk with your boys. Damn,
son, where'd you find this?
Man, that's a good one. That almost sounds like a mix of that guy and I took the whale and I ran it up to shore.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
We make it look easy or something like that. He's just putting the bear into the back of the car.
And the bears.
All right, you boys and bears, it's time to learn a lesson about how to carve up a whale. But anyways, moving on from that, we are going to be watching this clip right here, the 47th Brigade doing incredible work up in the Kursk Oblast today. This one's a little bit lengthy, so I don't know how much we'll be able to show, but it is a very interesting clip from the 47th Brigade today.
Oh dear, Bliat. It looks like they're coming to a bit of a head here.
And we can see the Russians. Well, actually, I think these are actually the Ukrainians. We see them deploying a smoke screen down there from the tank's smoke grenade dischargers. And we can now see the tanks continuing to roll on up. I gotta tell you, I don't really know how effective those smoke grenade dischargers are, because the amount of concealment that they provide is a very short window.
It's good, I guess, for a little short term. It's better than nothing.
I suppose, but how much better than nothing? I would say, I'd beg to say no. Oh my goodness. Looks like they just slammed the tree line with some sort of a rocket. I can't really tell what kind. Actually, that looks like a Bradley firing toes, I'm going to be entirely honest, up there at the lead.
It's like one of those rockets fired from Hezbollah.
Man, the swing of the sword, the clash of the knife, and then they get their asses beat like by some corn-fed guy from Nebraska. It's like, well, I guess that little song didn't help out much, did it?
They played that song right before Snazrullah got hit in the Nasrallah, or Nasrallah got hit in the Snazrullah, and he went and he got killed. Inshallah.
These bombs do be bombing, inshallah. That's like, yes, they do. Yes, they do. We drop the biggest, only the realest.
Or as Hezbollah Mickey said, inshallah.
No. We will take care of Bush, inshallah. We will take care of so-and-so. Well, he's dead already, but we'll take care of someone. Like, it's like, all right, man. All right. Oh my goodness. Dude, the auto... I'm not gonna lie, y'all. That was actually very close to friendly fire right there. Some BMP-2 in the background, off screen, just fired into the tree line. But if you watch the rounds, I mean, they literally were just passing right behind that Bradley. That didn't really seem that safe. I'm not gonna lie. And they did it again. Whack.
Someone said, I think it's time for your meds. No, I think it's time for your meds. Where's your sense of humor? Come on now.
Oh, come on now. with that profile picture that looks all blurry. Clean your camera. Like, come on. But anyways, moving on from that, we can see the Ukrainians continuing to make their way up to the tree line. Going to take advice on taking.
Man, what are you talking about? Taking my meds? You got to get like out of that depression first. So come on now. It's like you got to be able to laugh at a joke. Like you got to be able to laugh. I know the jokes are cringy sometimes. Like we try our best. We're not comedians or something. We're reporting the news here. But I tell you, like take my meds. Like come on now. Like you got me triggered with that one.
Take my meds. Please, taking advice on taking meds from someone who can't even wipe off their damn camera lens on their phone. Come on, like it really, like please, like that's like taking advice from someone who can't even get their car properly registered with insurance. Like how the hell can you not do that? It's a very easy thing. It's like 2 simple steps. And how in the world can you not pay a ticket? Like, you know, those kinds of things, you know, and actually have a criminal record of misdemeanors and then run a YouTube channel and try and bash us because you say that you just don't like us. And it's like, come on, there's like legitimate content there for that guy, but there's also legitimate content
or that guy that sent me an email. You remember that guy that sent me an email a few days back, and he wrote the whole email in the subject line and blasted me over email, and I responded to his email and said, you know, you wrote your whole email in the subject line. You didn't even write in the body of the email. I said, could you try again and resend it? So he sent the same nasty email again in the subject line of the email with nothing in the body. I responded again and said, learn how to write an email and get back with me when you learn how to write one. And he just gave up after they didn't even send anything.
Man, I'm telling you. Also, really quickly, they said, that was a joke, LOL, relax. Oh, I'm sorry, but really do please wipe off your camera. But anyways, moving on from that, we can see the Ukrainians now moving away from the tree line and now returning back towards the dragon's teeth.
Also, I see people laughing at the email situation. It's a real situation, by the way. Miss Disa got to see the images from those emails. I sent them over. I was like, look at this crazy guy, like writing his email in the subject line, blasting me and calling me all kinds of nasty names, and he couldn't even write his email correctly. He's like, we were laughing our asses off after the stream like 2 or 3 nights ago, reading those emails and my responses to them, like saying to learn how to write an email. It was like a good trolling. Like I usually don't troll like that, but it was pretty good.
Oh, dude, it was so funny because it was something like, title, you're an asshole, you little snot-nosed kid, learn how to run a show, you piece of shit. Like, email, nothing. Like, it was literally just blank. And it was like, where's the email? It's like, we just read the title, where's the email? It was the funniest thing. And so Matthew was just like, you got to learn how to write an email. And then he respond with another one, you little snot-nosed bastard, and it would be in the title again. It's like, you got to put it in the email. You got to put it in the actual area for the email.
I was genuinely concerned. I was trying to help him learn how to write emails in the midst of his like profanity-filled rant, and he just wouldn't listen, man. Like he wouldn't take my advice. I said, write it in the body. Like stop writing in the subject line. He did it every single time. I think after a while he started doing it out of spite. Like even though he knew he was doing it wrong, he just refused to put the email in the body. Like it was driving me more nuts than it was actually like what he was saying. I was like, just put it in the freaking body already, man. Don't keep writing in the subject line for God's sake.
Also moving on from that really quickly, we also did get some footage from the ground of the Bradleys involved in that last clip, operating near that tree line, so y'all can actually see that right here. I'll be muting it because it does have copyrighted audio. But still, getting back to what we were talking about right there while we watched the 47th in action again. I don't know if people know this, but like, you know, we've been doing this for 3 years now. Whenever anyone sends anything like just mean, it does not affect us at all. I remember the first thing I asked Matthew, the first thing I said about that, because he sent a screenshot of it to me over text, I said, what's his problem? And that was it. Like, I just didn't care. I was like, we've gotten so much of that stuff over the years. It's like, you know, we don't really care at all. It's funny, honestly, if anything. But we can see the Bradleys here lighting up that tree line. This is literally footage of the drone footage from the ground out of the Bradley. We can now see the Bradleys making it up to the tree line, continuing to fire. Somewhere at this point, that's where we saw the fire behind the Bradley, which does not show up on the ground footage.
Vinyl Vish Records said it's got to be one of them boomers. They know nothing about emails. I'm surprised he didn't ask for your fax number. I think he was a boomer because in the subject line where he wrote the whole email, which really bugged the hell out of me, he said something about you young whippersnappers don't know nothing about living or something like that. He wrote something like along those lines. I was like, okay, this guy's got to be like 50 plus or something like that, and he thinks he's gonna like tell me something. It's like, dude, it's like, what the hell? It's like, I've never even seen the guy's name in the live chat before. It's like the dude came out of the woodworks just going berserk.
And moving on from that, we also did get to see a Ukrainian Mi-35 in the location unknowns. Not to just completely move on, Matthew, but we do have a lot of news, and we are starting to run out of time heavily. But we were able to see this Ukrainian Mi-35 right here in this picture. We were also able to see the Russians trying to shoot down a Ukrainian FPV drone today with an RPG. This was actually the Akhmat unit that tried this, so, you know, take this with a grain of salt. That obviously failed. Oh my god, did he drop the camera? Like, what the hell happened, dude? What? Oh my god. Dude,
What happened?
this guy's first step, and I think he ate concrete immediately. Like, he just tripped and fell once his foot moved forward. Look at this, dude. This clown fires the RPG at a drone. And this guy turns around. Bam! Immediately hits the ground, like busts his teeth in at the beginning of filming. Now he's running.
Also, apologies, people. Apparently, boomers are 60 to 65, and I said 50 plus. Sorry.
And we can see the Akhmat guy looking around as the firefight has now begun with the FPV drone. He's breaking everything right now as he continues to run. Best cameraman ever. He's back at the Buhanka. They're now getting in it, and they're going to try and run away. This guy is now back out of the van, and then the video ends. But still, once again, Akhmat just doing whatever the hell they do. I don't even know what they're thinking. They just do stuff. But anyways, moving on from that, we did get to see a new Ukrainian anti-drone interceptor called the Sting. Check this thing out. What a nice tech demonstration. Moving on from that 4-second clip and into our next one, we were also able to see a brand new armored car, a Ukrainian Varda 2 with a 30mm turret installed onto the roof.
That's pretty sick.
It is.
It's literally called the Sick.
Yeah, it's called the Sick. Pop, pop, pop. Oh, dang, they got a little rapid fire function on that thing. Pretty cool. And that's the end of that clip, but still great to see. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see another Russian driving over a mine. That clip was promptly deleted, but we did also get to see the Russian casualty report today as well. And oh, buddy, oh, howdy, was it good.
It's juice, man. Only one Bobcat, but that's tremendous to see. I love any Bobcats taken out by the Ukrainians. I love to see it. But tell us more.
And Miss Disa, keeper of the records, has clarified a couple of things about this casualty report today. The correct total troop losses for today is actually 699,090, not 696,090. Another typo by the Kyiv Independent. But nevertheless, all the other amounts are correct. Recent weekly totals are near or above 10,000. 700,000 mark will be exceeded on the next report, meaning that when we come back on Wednesday, there will be an excess of 700,000 Russian soldiers wounded and killed. Also, one thing I do want to make clear to everyone, we're not going to be back on Tuesday this week to continue the next week of coverage. We're actually going to be back on Wednesday. As many of you all may know, Tuesday, November 5th, is the election here in the United States of America for the President of the United States. I believe some positions in the Senate as well, and also some in the House, I think, maybe. So if you are expecting a stream to run on November 5th, we are not going to be here. I'm going to let y'all know up front, because I know many people are about to ask the question, oh, you must be voting. Who are you voting for? I'm not voting, because we do know politics here on the stream. Honestly, feel like keeping that going as a standard in real life as well. I'm not going to vote. So y'all go out and vote if y'all want to. I'm personally not, just because we do know politics on the stream. Kind of want to carry that over into my personal life as best as I can as well, so I'm not going to be voting either. So Just want you all to know that. The reason why we are not running the stream is not because we're going to be voting. It's because it is going to be absolute chaos. Because, you know, everyone and their dog who's political is going to be roaming around the internet trying to make people vote for who, you know, who knows who. But we don't want to be dealing with that, covering a news stream. And not only that, we expect that really no one will be watching either that night because many people will probably be watching the election results instead. So for that reason, we are not running a stream that day. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Also, Coder for Liberty said House is every 2 years, Senate every 6, but they don't do them all at the same time. Like the House has an election every 2 years, but that's not for all 435 representatives simultaneously. It's actually done in groups. So one group of the House will have their election, and then another, and another, and another. The Senate the same. So I hope that does address that fairly well. Also, someone said no vote is bad form. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Voting here in Alabama, the Alabama is not going to be doing anything different than what it's been doing for like the past 40 years or 60 years, to be entirely honest. There is no point in me voting. And not only that, once again, I'm not getting into domestic politics for the large part. I also don't even want to make that a point where people can ask that or ask or question about it, or even find out what my political opinions are. I think most of y'all kind of get the idea. I'm usually indifferent to it and really don't pay a lot of attention to it if it's possible. And so I don't really want to vote for that reason because, you know, who knows how that would go. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. If y'all do vote, please do go vote. It's your democratic right. Everyone has a right to go vote. It's how this democracy functions. It's by people getting out and voting. I do highly encourage, though, that you vote and actually know what you're voting for. Don't just vote because you just vote for a certain party every single time, or that you just, like, someone because they got endorsed by a celebrity. Those are very bad reasons to go vote. Like, go vote because you actually study their policies and like something about one person or the other's policies. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. But moving on from that, we do have the casualty report. And 1,410 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 36 APCs, 46 supply trucks, 12 main battle tanks, 10 artillery systems, 70 drones, 1 cruise missile, and 1 special equipment vehicle. It is very interesting to see that these losses have remained high, and it is good to know that this is what it is. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on out of the location unknowns and on into the rest of the news that we have tonight. And so really quickly, though, I do have to say this. I don't know. Let me just be entirely honest with y'all here. Alabama votes a certain way for a certain party every single 4 years, and it's been that way the entire history of the state. It was either towards one direction before the 1960s, and then it flipped, and it's been voting the other direction since then. There is no reason for me personally to go out and vote in the state. One, because I don't want anyone to even be interested in what my political affiliations are. That's really no one's business. I don't want to try and go vote so that way it ends up becoming a point of discussion. 2, the state's electoral votes are going to go the way they go no matter what. So whether I agreed with that or disagree with that, me going out and voting in particular does not really make that much of a difference in this state. People in a democracy have a right to choose to vote and a right to choose not to vote. I'm exercising the right not to vote. Regardless of who gets voted in, I still love the United States of America. I'm still a good citizen of the Republic, and I'll still keep doing what I've been doing for 3 years now, for the next 4 years, and nothing will really change for me. That's largely how I look at it. Regardless of what policies come around or what happens, I'm just here giving you all the news of what's going on. That's all I do. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is our next little bit of news in the Northern Front, where we got to see the Ukrainians loading up a 20 millimeter ammunition belt for a Swedish APC. I believe this thing is called the PVP 302, which you can see right here. I think these things look whack, but still very interesting to see. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see the 14th Brigade in operation with a small little drone. I don't know what the drone's actually used for, but apparently it's used for something, which is pretty neat. So with that, we are going to be moving on down the line and into the area of Kremenna, where we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting Russian forces inside of the area. And so here's the clip. All right.
I had a joke I was gonna make there, but I'm gonna refrain. refrain.
No, I already know what it was.
I was about to roast the hell out of Hot Dog Man, but I'm gonna hold back because I'm a good person.
Man, Hot Dog Man eats the glizzies like,
Oh man. Oh my god.
I mean, you were gonna do it. I already knew what it was, and so I was like, I got to step forward and take the hit, buddy. I got to do it.
Oh my god. Oh.
Oh man, we see the Russians down there, and here comes the drone. You see the building getting blown out, kind of like Hot Dog Man, and look at the smoke rising from the building. You're getting a good laugh out of that one, aren't you?
Ms. Diesel said you should know better. I did. I'm not the one who said it.
But I did it because I was thinking the same exact thing, and when Matthew said that, I was like, it's time. I was like, it's on both of our minds, time to make the joke. And so it looks like people got a good laugh out of it a little bit. But moving on from that and down to the Seversk area, we also got to see a Ukrainian tank once again riding to the front. And that's the end of the clip. And moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to see a tank in the Seversk region. He's happy with his tank. He likes it.
This was right down the barrel of the yacht.
Well, that was interesting looking, but moving on from that and into our next clip further down the line and towards Bakhmut, we also got to see a Russian drone getting hit in this area. I'm telling y'all, the music is getting trashed these days.
Man, it was always trash, but it's getting even trashier.
It's like, thank you for the garbage. But we can see the drones just getting smacked around down here so much.
Man, I love moaning sounds over these drone videos right here. It's just always a great look.
Man, someone said, what's the audio we should have for this this Ukrainian drone obliterating Russians? I know, we ought to make it sound like, well, I can't say that one. We ought to make it sound like, we got to make it sound like the topic of the impeachments of the 90s. Ah, yes, that's a great track right there. Bring up the Monica Lewinsky. It's like, what the hell are people thinking when they come up with this music? You know what I mean? It's like, come up with something actually good. Just don't put brain rot in as the music. Like, we can't play it anyways, but just hearing the garbage at the start just gets me in a foul mood, a horrendous mood.
Oh, drone.
Oh. And these are actually Brazilian volunteers in the Chesapeake area.
Rio! É amigo! É amigo, ele falou.
I heard one word out of all that I understood, and I think he just did not like that drone a lot.
Man, I'm telling you.
Eu acho que eu derrubei. Derrubou não, eu vi. Mas ele penou de lado.
We see them walking along here. Really quickly, though, I do want to make a statement. Someone wanted to try and grill me for not voting. Put this out there very quickly again. I'm not voting. I've remained non-political on this channel for 3 years. I'm not going to be political in my personal life either. I know that once the election happens, a million people are going to be asking who did I vote for, and it's better to remain non-political and say I didn't vote, but y'all can.
Porra, essa é da antiga, hein?
I'll consider it, but I'm most likely leaning
I would at
towards
least
no.
give it a thought. I would at least give it a thought. Like, I get where you're coming from on the whole, like, non-voting thing. Like, I get what you're saying. I think people in the live chat are taking it out of context and thinking, oh, like, he's saying that because he wants to be, like, in spite of the whole election process. That's not it whatsoever. Like, honestly, like, I understand his sentiment. He's just fed up with the choices, to be perfectly honest with you. And we don't get into politics, but that's just part of it. But you should at least consider voting in Force. It's a good thing just to vote, even if you don't like the options, just to at least, you know, exercise your rights.
I see someone saying, let's see. So everyone keeps on saying, well, if you don't vote, you get to live with the consequences. Look, you live with the consequences either way, whether you vote or not. And considering that I'm trying to tell y'all, this channel is non-political, I'm not going to get political, so I'm going to make sure to extend that into my personal life and not vote, so that way no one's asking who I voted for. That's trying to make sure that we keep this channel non-political. Does that degrade the entire democracy that we live in and mean that y'all are all going to be living in squalor and a dictatorship? No, y'all all will still vote. But I'm going to make sure to try and keep this thing non-political as long as we possibly can. That's what I'm trying to say. And we see the Brazilians hanging out in this house for a little bit. And we see them looking outside.
Man, this place they're standing is absolutely shredded. Like, it is just a garbage scale at this point.
Man, it honestly is. And you see them looking around, I think they're kind of noting that at this point. And with that,
the sound is gone. No, there's just no sound in that video.
Yeah.
The sound was still there.
And with that, we're moving on into our next clip where we also got to see that according to the Kyiv Post, they are stating that Russia is mounting one of its largest offensives of the war so far, specifically within the Pokrovsk area. And once again, Ukrainian forces are under a good bit of strain at the moment around the area of Seladove, a major linchpin point of the battlefield right outside of Pokrovsk. And we were actually able to see a little bit of that footage today.
Доставаем стволы. Так, стволы снизу. Блядь, стволы-то снизу. Тихо, открывай бойницу. Він заряжений. Заряжений ствол. Открывай бойницу. Давай, стреляй, Юля. Коля, не можу відкрити. Що?
And we see them driving in the armored car. It's a pretty rough ride. And we see the infantry opening up the hatch here. And that's the end of the clip, but still an interesting one to see from Seladove. Moving on from that and down the line and into Kherson, we also got to see that the Russians are getting hit once again very heavily by the 73rd Naval Center of the SSO, which is pretty much holding down the entire area around Kherson at the moment. And we can see the Russians moving around as the Ukrainians continue to target them.
Oh, and boom.
And the boom blit, boom, jigga jigga, and we can see them targeting another Russian position. And we can see them hitting a Russian attic on the southern side. We believe this is around Oleski. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But very nice to see that they're continuing their operations, suppressing the Russians on the western bank of the Dnipro River. But moving on from that and on up to Kyiv, it is time for us to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 984 of the war. And it looks like it's not on the website, so let me make sure to go and try and grab this really quickly off screen. And let me see.
We want a long-lasting speech. We don't have speech on the website, but we have it on YouTube, hopefully. Long-lasting video.
And let's see here. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. And
I'm going to give you the chance to find the video.
let's see. We have another one right here. And so here is the clip, the speech. It's kind of a speech, more so of like a video sort of a thing. I don't really know how to explain that well, but let me really quickly make sure that we can get the English subtitles on this. So here we go, and let me make sure it's on the right audio track, and it is. And so without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Дорогі українці, українки, сьогодні я хочу звернутися до наших партнерів щодо одного з базових елементів миру. Україна завжди радіє, коли вдається повернути з російського полону наших людей. Повернути додому. Воїнів, цивільних. Це надзвичайно складно, але ми робимо все, що можна, щоб обміни відбувалися. Проте найскладніше – повертати не дорослих, а дітей, маленьких українців, які вкрадені у рідних, дітей, які вивезені з тимчасово окупованої нашої території, вивезені в Росію, і яких Росія намагається сховати. Ніхто сьогодні не скаже точно, скільки їх. Ми знаємо про десятки тисяч. Це і зовсім маленькі діти, і підлітки, ті, у кого є рідні в Україні, і ті, чиї рідні, на жаль, загинули від російських ударів. Іноді щастить, і діти самі можуть вийти на зв'язок з волонтерами, правозахисниками чи своїми родичами в Україні. Але більшість росіяни просто позбавляють будь-яких засобів зв'язку, забирають та знищують документи дітей, відправляють їх в чужі російські сім'ї, в неволі. Не те, що роки, а кожен день має значення. І так само має значення кожне зусилля, яке допомагає звільняти наших людей. Цього тижня в Канаді відбулася конференція щодо пункту формули миру, який присвячений саме такому нашому завданню – повернути додому всіх українських полонених, всіх наших депортованих і вкрадених українців. Участь у конференції взяли понад 70 держав та міжнародних організацій. Є повна підтримка для наших людей, для нашої держави та для нашої мети. Кожен обмін полонених – це досягнення. Кожна дитина, яка повернулась додому, в Україну – це щастя. Але всіх маємо повернути. Працює наша ініціатива Bring Kids Back UA. Разом з нами для цього об'єднані Арабські Емірати, Катар, Ватикан, країни-посередники та багато інших країн. Ми хочемо справжнього миру для України, для нашої землі та для всіх наших людей. І це справедливо. Справедливо повернути додому всіх, кого війною хотіли дому позбавити. Мир має бути надійним. Я дякую всім, хто допомагає Україні. Слава Україні!
Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 984 of the news of the war in Ukraine and really around the world. And with that, that is moving us on into the second question segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And what a night it has been so far. So far, the Lee Spring Army has raised an amazing $4,383 for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. An amazing total.
Whopper.
An incredible one. We've actually not seen a fundraiser that large for the past 2 weeks, and somehow, crazily enough, the Lee Spring Army pulled together and absolutely blew forward an incredible victory for the fundraiser. Not only that, an amazing amount of people have been here tonight listening to the news as well, with 13,100 people here at the peak and 108,000 people watching so far. We are entirely grateful and honored to know that so many of y'all have enjoyed this stream and have enjoyed listening to the news. We always put a lot of credit and effort into trying to make this thing possible and keep it running every single night. And I got to thank you all massively for being here with us and enjoying it so far tonight, as we have certainly had a large amount of news to cover. I do want to make sure that we will... Really quickly, I just saw some there, Matthew. Make sure to tell people there's no advertising of other channels in the live chat either, because I just saw a couple of people try and pull that off really quickly. But nevertheless, I do want to make sure that we keep y'all apprised of how this channel will be running here over the next few days. Of course, as usual, we do not run live streams on Monday. Neither will we be running it on Tuesday. Tuesday is November 5th here in the United States of America and, of course, around the world. But most importantly, November 5th is the elections inside the United States. We know that many people will be paying attention to that a lot more than they'll be paying attention to the news here on this channel. And for that reason, it gives us a little bit of time to breathe and relax. And also, I have seen a lot of y'all giving a little bit of a statement of displeasure about me not voting. So I'll consider it. I might go out and vote. But generally, the reason why, just to make sure that people know this again, because I see a lot of people theorizing or trying to come up with ways as to why I would not vote. The reason why I am not voting, well, at least the reason why I said I would not vote, it's not because I hate both options or I'm a diehard of one party and I don't like their option and I just don't vote the other way and I don't vote that way. That's not how none of that works. The reason why I was not going to vote, and I'll consider it because generally I have always voted since I've been able to. I voted in the last election and was generally planning on doing it this time, but considering how diehard the channel has been publicly on remaining apolitical and not getting into politics, it generally seemed a little bit more like a wiser idea to me to make sure that I do not vote. And the reason why, and I'll explain this really quickly, is that while it is a democratic right to vote and is an important way that this nation continues to have a surviving and thriving democracy, this channel has largely been removed from talking about anything in the domestic political sphere. And we will, of course, remain that way even after the election. The issue with that, however, is that if I do vote, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm not going to tell y'all I did not vote or tell y'all some sort of a lie or fabrication that if I voted, I did not vote to try and throw y'all off of that. I would have to tell y'all that I did vote. And then people are going to be asking the question, who did I vote for? Because at that point, and I know this to be certain, half of the country is going to be pissed off no matter how this election goes, because someone is going to get elected that they don't like, one way or the other. And so if I vote for the person that they don't like, they're going to start grilling me. Who did you vote for? If you voted for the right person, you tell me. And if you didn't, you're an asshole. And it's going to start creating a interesting kind of a dynamic. And that's generally why I wanted to make sure that I said that so that way we would remain politically neutral. And then a load of y'all are saying I should vote, which generally I would if it wasn't for me wanting to make sure that even after the election, this channel remained literally 100% politically neutral. So that's generally why that decision or the statement was being made, so that way people wouldn't be wanting to come up after the election because their candidate lost, whichever candidate that was, and trying to insinuate that I supported that candidate. Because I am going to be telling people if I vote that I did vote, but beyond that, it's going to be absolutely no one's information who I voted for. That's largely how that works. So, you know, I'm gonna let y'all know this. Considering so many people do want me to vote, and I generally do want to vote in the election, I am going to go vote. But I will let y'all know this from the outset. I am not telling anyone who I voted for. No matter how close you think you are to the channel or to Matthew and me, I'm not telling anyone who I voted for. If I see anyone try and pressure me in the chat after the election on who I voted for, that will be grounds for an instant ban. I'm not going to be entertaining people trying to insinuate that I support the party they don't support. This channel will never get involved in domestic politics. We're never going to make that a discussion or a key element of the identity of this channel or of the enforcers in general. So I will go vote, but I do want to make it very clear, no one will know what the candidate I vote for is. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that going forward, because that will not be something that I'm going to be coming back to, is everyone trying to figure out whether they're going to like me or not based off of who I voted for, considering that we don't even talk about domestic politics at all on this channel. So with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and I hope that does allow some people to know that I'm not trying to just sit there and spit in the face of democracy, generally trying to respect the political neutrality of this channel to the utmost degree, but I will go vote since many people want me to, and I generally want to anyways. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the questions. And also, I see this. I want to answer this really quickly. Bootlegger said, just tell them it's none of their business and leave it at that. This is how this goes, though, because the people who will ask that question, just to put this out there, are very ignorant people. Like, not a lot of people will be asking that question, but the people who do will be very ignorant people. And that's not to say that they're from one side or the other. There's people like this on both sides. Someone's going to lose. Let me put that out there. Someone is going to lose, obviously. There cannot be two winners in a presidential election. One will lose and one will win. It's either going to go towards the right or it's going to go towards the left, just to try and put that as neutrally as possible. And whichever way that goes, if it goes to the right, people on the left are going to be pissed. If it goes to the left, the people on the right are going to be pissed. And the small niche of ignorant people on both sides of that aisle, on both sides there, are going to be pissed if their person loses. And they're going to come onto this channel and they're going to go, did you vote? And I'll go, yes. Who did you vote for? I'm not saying. And I've made that very clear now. I'm going to go vote, but I'm not going to tell anyone. And so then what they're going to do is they're going to say, oh, well, I guess you didn't vote for the right person then, you sick bastard. And then they'll go around and say that we're either hardcore communists or we're Hitler or something like that. And it's just going to snowball from there. That's going to be how that goes. That's why I generally wanted to say, going to hold off on that because it's going to turn into something for a small niche group of people, and the niche group of ignorant people like that usually speak the loudest, and then people are going to be saying that we're either hardcore communists or we're literally Hitler throughout the rest of the internet from that little small group for the rest of time. But anyways,
man, all I know for me, I've been voting since I was a little tyke. I've been voting for ages, but mainly because my whole interest was political science, and I took that. So that was my whole thing. So I've been voting for ages. The enforcer been voting as well. So I have a feeling he'll probably end up voting. I have a suspicion that he will.
Oh, no,
and also, enforcer, you don't have to tell anybody who you voted for. And even if someone asked you, like, just don't tell them. That's literally private information. It's not public record, and it's something that most people should not know about unless you just want to tell, like, someone, like, that's a friend or something like that. You don't have to tell a soul. And in fact, anybody asking that really shouldn't be asking that in the first place. Is the honest answer.
But you know, Matthew, just like I know, some people are going to ask that because there is always radicals on both sides that are just die hard, and they mean if you disagree with me in any way, shape, or form on a political topic, and I just even believe or allege that you did, I'm going to hate you from here forward and make it my life's purpose. Like, a great example of that would be Magic Sky Girl, who was a viewer of this channel a long time ago, literally heard a rumor that we were affiliated with a political group that she wasn't a fan of, and instantly went on to Twitter after she had been a fan for us for about a year at that point, and started to dox our house and wish that we would get killed and stuff like that. People are like that. And that's generally what I was trying to make sure would not happen, because I will promise you there's going to be some interesting people who come out of the woodworks after the election and start doing that regardless of who loses, because they're going to be just angry and looking for people to blame. And, some of these people, very small group of them having watched this channel, we will be one of their number one targets if they even think that we did not vote for the person they wanted. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I'm going to let y'all know this, though. Make it clear, since many people want me to vote, and I generally do want to vote, I am going to go vote. But it's not going to be anyone's business what my vote is. To be entirely honest, I might ban people who just ask that question at all, because I'm not going to be having people start going down the goofy insinuation rabbit hole that I did something people didn't like, because that's not at all what the channel was ever about. It's not about domestic politics. It's a thing that's currently going on right now, but it's not going to become that just because the election came and went. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our final question segment of the night, we have to address our top donors of the night first, because we've reached $4,383 of the $3,000 goal, which is well above the goal. And huge shout out to everybody in the LSA for making that happen once again and making that possible. And shouting out our first top donor of the night. This one goes to none other than Hal Rose, who puts in a $333 donation. And huge shout out to you, Hal, for that massive donation. You did not actually add your name to it. It came in as anonymous, but I have a feeling that was indeed Hal Rose, because he always throws in the $333 donation. So huge shout out to you, Hal, once again. And also, while we're at it, huge shout out to LSA Rocks, who threw in a $300 donation, which is also very massive, along with Rita Fuchs, who threw in a $300 as well, along with Nicholas Condor, who threw in a $250, and BC Skyman, who threw in a $220, and then we had a $100 from some guy called The Enforcer that likes to hang around the channel, and he likes to vote. And we also have a $100 from Hal Rose, as well as a $100 from Fredster, as well as Dustin Mayo and BC Skyman once again, and then we had a $100 from Just Chillin', as well as Bobo Vasquez, as well as a $50 from Greg Carrier, Axel K, Leora Avigile, as well as David Dornblasser, Mike Smith, What 42, who also put in a $50, along with Richard McGurl, John Person, and Tom S. And huge shout out to you all for donating. Even if we were not able to call your name off, you've all made this possible tonight. Almost $4,400 raised for a great Ukrainian charity. And once again, huge shout out to you all. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a massive shout out to everyone who supported the fundraiser tonight. It has been unbelievable. $4,403 raised here on this channel. That is absolutely incredible, considering that a lot of people ran into issues supporting the fundraiser tonight because they just simply were not coming through. But I thank everyone who was a part of this tonight, both big and small, because every single one of y'all together makes this thing possible every single weekend. And y'all are the reason why we can say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die, because it will never truly die, thanks to the unbelievable and amazing efforts of each and every single one of y'all and what y'all been doing for a while. And so with that, we are now on into them questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we are now jumping into our live chat questions for the night. And remember, folks, no live chat, or no, excuse me, we have live chats, obviously, I just said that. No super chats tonight, because it is the Sunday night fundraiser stream, so we don't take super chats. It all goes to the charity of the night. 100% goes to the charity, and YouTube take care of the processing fees as well, as I stumbled the hell through that like I'm a drunk. But anyway, moving on to our actual Morse code decoders of the stream, and as you can tell, my tiredness is catching up to me a little bit here. Let me try to hold it together. The Morse code decoders tonight were Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps for Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. And they said, the Morse code says, North Korea will soon learn that they are beginning to play a very dangerous game in LLT, LSA.
And that is the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 984th day of the war, because it is absolutely crazy to see that y'all have continued to get that thing dead on the nail for just about 900 days at this point. We started doing Morse codes, I think, about 80 days into the war, so this means it's literally about 900 days after the start of the Morse codes. Y'all are still getting those things dead on the nail. So I gotta congratulate y'all for that, and give y'all a massive thanks for continuing to get the message out to everyone what the Morse code says. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our first live chat question of the night is going to go to none other than Michael Thomas, who says, we have 72 active duty B-52s, and how many have been sent to the Middle East?
We don't really know for certain. I believe it's something around 14 to 20. From what we've heard. That's what I'm at least hearing at the moment, but we don't have an exact number yet. We've only been told that B-52s from Minot, or is it Minot? Is it what? How's it pronounced?
It's Minot.
Minot Air Base have been transferred into the Middle East. So we don't have an exact number at the moment, but we would assume it's somewhere in a larger number, maybe 15 to 20, or a little bit less than that. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Chris Chastain, who puts in a very good live chat question here about the B1. He said, how fast can the B1s be converted back to nuclear capable?
I think it's literally just like installing the nuclear armament switches back into the cockpit and reconnecting that to the electrical wiring inside the aircraft to be able to make that possible. So from what I understand, it doesn't take that much at all, really, for that matter, to get those things back into being nuclear capable. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Once again, though, I'm not exactly a aircraft mechanic or an expert on that, so it may be a much more simpler understanding than what it really is. But from what I understand, it wouldn't be that difficult of a modification. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and this question goes to Arthur, who says, what can China really say or even do to actually exercise their influence and get North Korea to back down?
They're really North Korea's only military partner. Not only that, they provide the lion's share of any food aid that the North Koreans receive, meaning that they keep everyone in North Korea alive. So the Chinese actually hold a lot of weight over the North Koreans. One, they keep them all alive. Two, they're their only military partner. So for those two reasons, China holds a lot of weight over the North Koreans just about every single day. And they don't really exercise that weight a lot. They're very benevolent in it, but they can if they want to. And so I hope that does address that well. And at least give the two big reasons why the Chinese actually have a good bit of control over the North Koreans and limiting what they do. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Happy Dragon, who says, do you think the U.S. should remove all restrictions on where weapons can be used since North Korea has now sent troops to Russia to fight in the war?
Yes, I think so. I think we actually should have done that before the North Koreans got involved, just to make sure that the Ukrainians can fight the Russians on the same playing field the Russians are fighting them. But it seems as though the current U.S. Government doesn't really like that idea and is generally trying to curb what the Ukrainians can do a great deal. So I would say yes, but of course reality is entirely different. But still, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Purple Gerbil, who says, has Israel ever fought a war outside the Middle East?
Israel has, from what I recall, has never fought a war outside the Middle East. All of their wars can be categorized as defensive conflicts, generally within their regional area. And I do not believe that they have ever fought outside of that area. So Israeli wars, and let me see if I can go get a list of them. And so let's see here. Shouldn't be a long one. So let's go through them. The War of Independence, the Sinai War, the Six-Day War, the War of Attrition, the Yom Kippur War, Operation Litani, which, of course occurred inside of southern Lebanon, and then the First Lebanese War, the Security Zone Campaign, the First Intifada. Let's see here. Yeah, that's once again in the Palestine-Israel area. The Second Intifada, the Second Lebanese War, Operation Cast Lead, against Hamas, so once again inside the Gaza Strip. Operation Pillar of Defense, Protective Edge, once again all against Hamas. This is also against Hamas in the Israel-Palestine crisis. And then Operation Swords, which is the one that we're currently in right now. And Operation Northern Arrows, which is the invasion of southern Lebanon against Hezbollah, which is also once again in the Middle East. So their entire war list, it all pretty much happens within the localized area of the Middle East. They have never been involved in a war outside of their direct borders. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Doomsday Games, who says, in your analysis, in your opinion, what is the chance of conflict on the Korean Peninsula?
The chances of conflict on the Korean Peninsula are pretty decent at the moment. And of course, I'm not saying that's an all-out war that'll turn nuclear, just a border skirmish is a conflict, and it looks like it's very close to that. But we'll never really know for certain. With the United States starting to do show of force missions with the B-1 Lancers, that may actually get the North Koreans to start backing off a little bit and make conflict far less likely, which I actually am kind of leaning towards. Hopefully that will happen. But at the moment, with how things are existing over the past few days, it is literally just one action away from becoming a shooting conflict at the moment. So it's a very close call, but I would generally say it probably will not happen, hopefully. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Mad Machine, who says, do you think that Poopler and Kimmy the Dictator taught because he's short, fat, and round? All right. He said, will he stick it through to the end, or will Kimmy bail when Poopler's defeat becomes certain?
I think he'll probably bail when a defeat becomes certain. Because at that point, what are the North Koreans doing there? If the Russians are defeated, there's no point in them fighting, so they probably bail out a little bit beforehand, or right at the moment the peace treaty is signed, because what would be the point of hanging around after that? So I think that, to be entirely honest, he's not going to be around for much longer than they would be needed, at least in the Russians' eyes. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Judy from the live chat, who says, if the B-52 is carrying nukes and it gets hit, would the nukes actually end up going off?
Usually the nukes are unarmed inside of the B-52s during flight. Generally, historically, that's what's been shown. The nuclear weapons are only armed once they're dropped from the pylons inside of the aircraft. I think historically, one B-52 broke up in flight with nuclear weapons on board, and none of the nuclear weapons went off. I think one of them is still actually stuck in the North Carolina mud somewhere, and they've never been able to find it. But none of them were armed. All of them were unarmed. Although I think one of them actually was very close to going off. I think it had gone through almost all of the arming phases except for the last one. So if that last arming phase had somehow gone through, it would have actually detonated on impact with the ground, which would have created a significant amount of fallout, or it would have airbursted. I'm not really sure which one they said it was supposed to do, but nevertheless, there would have been a decent amount of significant damage, at least in that rural area where that bomb fell. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this question goes to Kachulian343, who says, I could see it go either way. On the one hand, North Korea is China's toy, and Russia has been playing with it. But at the same time, China does benefit from the chaos, and they need Russia for their goals. And what are your thoughts?
I would say generally, I'm still leaning more towards the camp. The Chinese may actually try and get the North Koreans to pull out of the Ukraine war, because it's just not really in their interest to try and make the Europeans and the West as a whole view the Eastern world as a threat, like a major threat to their security. With letting the North Koreans do that, especially now that the United States has kind of forced China's hand to show whether they're really in support or in condemnation of what North Korea is doing, this may actually start to lead the Western sphere to be a lot more unified than it was looking to be in the past few years. So going off of that, I actually think that the Chinese probably will more so be looking at the long-term picture and probably try and demand that the North Koreans withdraw from the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. Once again, that's just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this question is going to go to Kenneth Jarvis, who says, do you think that when the body bags start flowing back to North Korea, that Kim will flip and do something crazy?
Nah, and he doesn't care about those people. Like, their debts mean absolutely nothing to him, because they could starve in a famine and it wouldn't really mean much either. At least, you know, and when we're talking about like tens of thousands or maybe 100 or several 100,000, it wouldn't really mean that much. So when they start flowing back in body bags, it won't matter to Kim. And so I don't really think anything extreme would happen, entirely honest, as well. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this question is going to go to Miller Pebble, who says, evening, guys, and evening to you, Miller. And they said, this looks like an attempt to stretch U.S. attention at the moment. We have the Red Sea, the disgrace in the Middle East, and also Ukraine, Korea, and South Asian Sea. And what are your thoughts? Are they trying to stretch us thin, or are these organic conflicts?
I would have to say they're most likely organic conflicts. All of these have different roots and beginnings. They're not all some sort of a unified plot by all of these countries involved. They're very different in what started them, and most of them started at completely different times. Like, for example, the whole issue with Iran and Israel started around October 7th of 2023, a little over a year ago. The situation in the Korean Peninsula started around winter of last year, and then the Ukraine war has been going on since 2021. So for the large part, well, actually, it's been going on since 2022. So for the large part, all of these had completely different starting points, and they all started for different reasons. I mean, you look at the reasons, they were fairly legitimate reasons, at least at the time, for there to be small escalations that snowballed into massive incidents that would happen down the road that we're dealing with right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person through in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be David Tablet, who says, if China encourages North Korea to be involved in a war, don't they risk being dragged into the war themselves?
That is a good question. And let me make sure to get that one. If China, Not really, because China is not geographically even in the area around the Ukraine war right now, so while the North Koreans can be involved, there really is no pressure on anyone in East Asia to be involved in any way, shape, or form. That's why you see that there isn't really a lot of support being provided by Eastern Asian countries, such as South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Taiwan, or really oceanic countries like Australia and New Zealand, is because while they do support Ukraine, there isn't really a reason for them to support them that heavily, and that's also why no one else, either on the Russian side, is supporting the Russians that heavily, because there's really no incentive. They're geographically so far away from Ukraine, they can really stay out of it quite easily, and there's really no way for them to get dragged in. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream, exactly 2 hours and 30 minutes in. I got to thank all of y'all so much once again for enjoying this stream tonight and watching it. 13.1 thousand people were here at the peak, and 114,000 people have watched the stream so far. I once again want to remind everyone that we will not be running a live stream until this next Wednesday, which will be on the 6th of November at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We will not be running a stream on Monday as per our usual schedule, but we will also not be running a stream on Tuesday because that will be the presidential election, and we know that many people will be paying attention to that a lot more. Just to let y'all all know, I will be voting, but I will not be telling anyone who I'm voting for, so do not ask that question. But nevertheless, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all on Wednesday to cover the next 72 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And once again, folks, huge shout out for everybody helping us to reach the fundraiser goal tonight. A whopping $4,423 raised, which is well above the $3,000 goal. And once again, it's all thanks to the LSA, and we appreciate that very much. And also, thank you all for another great stream tonight. We currently have about 113,000 people that have watched the stream up to this point. So be sure to hit the like button on the way out. And also, be sure to join us either tomorrow or Tuesday, midday, for the short war summaries. We will still be putting those out until we come back on Wednesday for the next live stream for war news. So be sure to join us then. And in the meantime, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest. And also, it is on Tuesday, that is. Be sure to go vote. Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday, November the 5th. But anyways, with that, my brain's getting tired. Go get some rest, folks, and we'll see you on Wednesday. And good night.
Yes. The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards